Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment of the Township of Union, which is being held pursuant to the Open Public Meeting Law C-231, Laws of New Jersey, dated 1975. Notice of this meeting was advertised in the local source as well as the Star Ledger, the newspapers of record, and notice has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building adjacent to the municipal clerk's office. Roll call.
Mr. Bentavegana.
Here.
Mr. Johnson.
Here.
Mr. Wiley.
Here.
Miss Alexander.
Here.
Miss Martins.
Here.
Miss Scott.
Here.
Mr. McNeil.
Here.
Mr. Graves.
Here.
And Mr. Champy.
There being a quorum present, this meeting is now declared open. Mr. Manguso, are there any communications?
There are no communications, Mr. Chairman.
Moving on, our first order of business this evening is the adoption of the resolution for calendar number 3415 Muriel Jean-Pierre, located at 928 Arnett Avenue, Block 501, Lot 34, and it was a driveway expansion.
For the
Mr.
record, Mr. Chairman, that resolution will be carried for the public meeting on June 7th, 2023. It was not circulated in advance of the meeting for the board to review, so we have to carry that resolution to the June 7th, 2023 meeting. It will be circulated to the board in advance of that meeting and passed in accordance with the law.
Mr. Pansula, will we need a motion in a second?
No, it's not scheduled. It's not ready to be heard tonight, so it's just for the record. It'll be carried and put on the agenda for June 7th.
Thank you for that explanation. Continuing onward, our next order of business is calendar number 3404, Belly Holdings LLC, located at 2013 through 2017 Springfield Avenue, Block 5813, lots 50 and 51, and it's for the construction of a 9-unit multifamily dwelling with off-street parking. It was carried for a continued hearing from last week's meeting of May the 10th, and the original case was heard on November 16th, 2022. Ms. Moore, would you like to?
Just for the record, Ms. Moore, before we get started, I note that Board Member Ricardo McNeil has a conflict. There was a direct relationship with the attorney for the applicant. There's a hiring, so it's a standard need to recuse him. So for the record, he will not participate and leave the dais and is ineligible to participate tonight. The board still has a full complement of members, including, just for the record, too, confirmation that absent members can certify that they viewed the tape.
Thank you so much. Good evening, Chair and members of the board. My name is Marcia Moore from the law firm of Post Pollock on behalf of the applicant Belly Holdings LLC. As you may recall, tonight we're seeking an application for a preliminary and final site plan approval, as well as a D1 use variance, bulk variances, and design waivers to construct a 9-unit multifamily dwelling building. As you're both all aware, that this property lies in 2 municipalities, the Valsalk section, as well as Maplewood. The proposed building that was previously submitted lies in the township of Maplewood. However, the 5 of the parking spaces, as well as attention and the driveway, lies in this municipality. The property, as you know, is located in the RB2. The last time we were here, we presented our architect who went over the architectural features of the project. Certain questions arose. We also presented our civil engineer who testified regarding the civil component, and there were some questions with respect to the refuse as well as parking, and at that time we adjourned the matter so the applicant could revise the plans. The applicant has submitted revised drawings, which you'll hear tonight, which addresses the Collier Design Engineering Report. I believe the most recent report that I have is dated March 20th, 2023, so we will be addressing those changes or any concerns referenced in the report. And we're also in receipt of an amended memorandum from the fire department dated March 17th, 2023, which we are prepared to answer. You'll hear tonight that our civil engineer has had discussions with the fire department, and we'll be able to reconcile any comments or concerns that the fire department may have. So at this time, I would like to call my first witness, will be our civil engineer, Anthony Gallerano.
Mr. Gallerano, it's Rob Pansul, the board attorney. Can I ask you to raise your right hand and swear or affirm that the testimony you can provide this evening is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
And for the record, just state and spell your name and your business affiliation.
Sure. It's Anthony Gallerano, spelled Gallerano, with the firm of Harbor Consultants, and we're located at 320 North Avenue East in Cranford.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Gallerano, you weren't here the last week. You can just state your educational background and what license, if any, you hold?
Sure. So I have a Bachelor of Science degree from New Jersey Institute of Technology in Civil Engineering. Graduated in 1984. I've been licensed as a professional engineer, professional planner since 1988. Since then, I have testified, excuse me, throughout New Jersey before various boards.
The board will accept his credentials.
Thank you. And
All
so
right, thank
for clarification for the board, Mr. Gallerano will be serving both capacities, our civil engineer as well as our planner. The first part of his testimony will discuss the master plan, and then just if the chair would allow, once he finishes civil, we will be addressing the traffic, and then we also bring back Mr. Gallerano, discuss the variances that we're seeking, just to give some clarity of how we're presenting the application. So you're familiar with this project, correct?
Yes, I am.
We mentioned that we did present, your colleague did present the civil component of this project. We have revised the plans. If you just start by background, by just giving us an overall concept of what the applicant was proposing as far as design, and then I'll have some further questions.
Sure. So when we first looked at this site, I know my colleague had gone through some of the specifics, but I just want to just take a step back and just look at it more in the perspective of the vision of this project. When we first looked at the site and working with the architect and working with the owner, we envisioned this as we call a walkable or pedestrian-friendly building, meaning that the target tenants are people that want to be near neighborhood services, want to be near mass transit, and don't necessarily want to have multiple cars. People who want to have one car, maybe no cars. And again, that's the target here. It's to, again, attract people, target people who want to take advantage of the location, right? They want to be near, again, near downtown, near neighborhood services, mass transit. So the idea is that not to have multiple cars, one car, maybe no cars. So that was how this project was envisioned. I don't want to jump too far ahead. I'm going to get into some of this in the planning testimony, but when you look at your master plan, that's exactly what the master plan is calling for this type of property. And I just want to highlight a couple of those points. Again, we're going to get back into the planning testimony a little bit later after my colleagues testify, but when you look at your master plan and look at the goals and objectives, there's a few here that really, again, align with this project. One of the goals is to reduce the need for parking by encouraging development and design that provides for safe, convenient, and practical access to neighboring destinations through improved pedestrian and bicycle circulation and transit service. Again, that's exactly aligned with what this applicant, again, is looking to target for this building. Require bicycle parking as part of new commercial and multifamily development. Applicant is providing bike racks, and again, is encouraging tenants or looking for tenants who, again, want to use that alternate source of transportation. Another goal and objective is electrical vehicle charging infrastructure should be encouraged as part of new development, rehabilitation or redevelopment of all uses where parking and vehicle storage is provided, and this applicant is providing EV charging stations. Another goal, limit high-density and multi-unit residential development to areas with convenient access to transit. And I'll go over it later, the transit access. There are several bus routes within reasonable walking distance of the site. Provide incompatible non-residential uses from locating on residential streets or in residential areas which would generate adverse traffic to noise, safety, or infrastructure. And then lastly, to encourage reuse of vacant properties that enhances the character of development and reduces traffic impacts. So again, when you look at what the applicant envisioned for this property, it's right in line with your master plan and what the master plan is calling for this type of property. So that's the goal there. And again, when people come, tenants, prospective tenants come here, they're going to be advised as to what the rules are of the building, right? You get one car. There's 12 parking spaces provided. There's 9 units. So each unit will be assigned a parking space. The additional 3 spaces will be for visitors. The applicant secured 5 parking spaces across the street, 4 overflow. Again, not really encouraging that, but if somebody did have 2 cars, they could park there. So people come here, they understand that these are the rules. This is what you get here. And they have a choice. They have a choice. They can decide to rent here, or if somebody had 3 cars, they probably need to find a place that's more suitable, right? And that's a choice they would have to make. So with that, again, that's kind of what the vision was and how this plan developed to where it is. So with that, let me just go through the changes that we did.
So, yeah, so Collier Design provided a memorandum that was initially prepared, and then we revised the plans. In connection with that, you have submitted or provided a summary of the changes of January 19. So if you can walk through the revisions, in particular the lighting, and one of the major concerns was respect to the enclosure for the trash enclosure. Where is that located? And then I'll have some follow-up questions.
Sure. So,
Just before you move on, Mr. Gallerano, if you could, that little summary intro was planning, not your role as the professional engineer, correct?
yeah, it lends itself more to planning. I
Okay.
just wanted to give that overview. I'm going to get it
I
more
just
into
want to be
detail with
clear,
some of that a little bit later.
because, we heard no planning testimony originally, so that's uncharted waters, and I just want the board to understand that the quote, you were quoting from the master plan, you were not quoting from the zoning ordinances and the expectations of the two-family zone, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That was more, just, again, planning how this project aligns.
And this property, as it's situated in the Township of Union, is in a two-family zone, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
And so, Mr. Pasalone, the chair, so we will be addressing the D1 variance that we're seeking, as well as the Medici standard that we know we have to meet as far as site suitability.
Understood. He started with the planning testimony. That's why I just wanted to make sure the board was grounded in reference to that introduction.
Sure, thank you. So, looking at Collier's letter of March 20th, so there are some design waivers that we needed to address. First was respect to the parking. The RSIS requires that an 18-foot parking spot, but it stipulates that the parking spaces can't overhang onto a sidewalk. So the spaces that are along the building, along that sidewalk that runs in front of the building, we're going to provide a decorative bollard in front of each spot. So that would then prevent a car from overhanging onto the sidewalk. That would bring the parking spaces in alignment with the RSIS requirements. Again, talked about a zero parking lot, a zero parking spot, zero setback parking from a property line. And again, we do have we're requesting a waiver along the adjoining property. And again, we have provided parking stops there to prevent a car from hitting the fence. So in that case, there's no sidewalk, so we don't necessarily have to have the bollards. But if your engineer thought that those were required, the applicant would be willing to do that in place of the parking stops. There was, again, it points out that there's no parking, prohibits parking in the front yard areas, and we do have parking in the front yard of Montclair Avenue. Again, that's a design waiver, not a variance. And the ordinance requires screening and planting of not less than 4 feet. And the applicant is looking to maintain the existing fence there as opposed to screening from the parking to the adjoining property. There's some traffic and parking circulation layout comments, and our traffic engineer is also going to provide testimony. There was I just want to point out that there was a question about ambulance access and fire access. And I did have the opportunity to talk to your Fire Prevention Bureau, and when they initially reviewed this application, they didn't realize that this was a covered parking area. So their comments were based on what they thought was an open parking area. When I spoke to them, they indicated that they would not attempt to bring a fire engine under a building. And that's typical with most towns. I mean, we work with towns all over the state. I'm also the city planner for City of Elizabeth. We have numerous buildings like this in the city, and the fire department would never want to bring a fire truck under the building. So that's consistent with what I see with other fire departments. So my conversation with them, they were actually okay with the building the way it is right now, as we're proposed. They will not attempt to bring the fire truck under the building. They would not need then the fire striping and the fire access lane. We did, as part of our site plan.
Before you
we
go
did-
back, Tony,
Sure.
there was one another comment in the fire, that report, that memorandum, about a mechanism in order to, Maplewood treats the building, access the building, and then Vauxhall Union will address the parking lot. Can you just address that comment in the the report?
Yeah, so I guess their assumption is that they will be servicing the parking lot, where I guess Maplewood would be servicing the building. So their concern is mainly with servicing the parking area. But just so you know, most towns have mutual aid, so typically when there's a fire, most of the surrounding fire departments all respond anyway. But the principal responsibility for Union would be the parking lot. And if there was to be some kind of a controlled access, they would obviously have to have access into the parking lot. Their preference is probably not to have a gate. They would probably rather be able to get in without having to, unlock or open a gate. But either way, we would have to provide them access if there was to be a gate, so.
Right. So in summary, we can address that or comply with that condition as
Yes.
condition of approval?
Yes, absolutely. Again, with the ambulance access on the site plan, we did show turning templates, and we showed that an ambulance can turn into the parking lot. It wouldn't have to go, again, under the building. It could stage itself in the driveway, or if the handicap spot was open, it could pull into the handicap spot. But typically in an emergency situation, ambulances, they park where they can park. They typically park on the street. If somebody didn't have a driveway or cars were in a driveway and they responded to a house, they would park in the street. In this case, we don't have to. They can stage within the parking lot. And again, the fire department didn't take any exception to that. They thought that would be adequate. So, those were the concerns, I believe, at the last meeting with respect to the fire access, to the ambulance access. And again, that can all be has all been addressed with the fire department. There was also, I guess, a concern with the refuse area, or maybe lack of one at the time. So, see if I can pan over. So we've proposed a 10-foot by 10-foot refuse area, which is off to the corner of the parking lot, off into the outside of the parking lot, but to the back corner. And that's going to be a 10-foot enclosure with a 6-foot high solid fence. And we did look at the ability to, what could be stored there. So there's two options. It really depends on who the hauler is, because this is going to be a private pickup. So each hauler, depending on who you use, would have their own method. So it could be large containers, like 95-gallon, I guess called garbage containers. They're not really dumpsters, but they're just larger containers. They're 95 gallons. They could be rolled out. Or we could fit two small dumpsters that would roll out also. And again, that would really depend on the hauler. Either one would be adequate. These would be secure. They would be in the enclosure. This area would be, obviously monitored by the owner. Anybody who's not following the rules, not putting the garbage where it's supposed to, is going to be asked to move out. I mean, they're going to have a lease, that's going to be a condition of the lease, and it's going to be the owner's responsibility to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to do. So this is going to be designated area, closed containers, and that's where the refuse and recycling will go. I think that was it as far as the concerns. I know that some of the traffic concerns, our traffic engineer will.
There were a couple
will
comments
address.
on the lighting, whether or not the lighting and landscaping plan. You just mentioned the lighting, the adequacy. I know there was one of the comments from one of the board members at the last meeting regarding the adequacy of any site lighting, so if you just wanted to address that.
Yeah, we did review that. We are consistent with the requirements of the ordinance. There is a restriction not to be over I think it's .03 at the property line. We did review that, and we do comply with the ordinance. The landscaping comment was referring to I believe, to the site triangle, and we have to make sure that any landscaping in the site triangle is like a low growing, less than 2 feet. So any modification that we need to make in the site triangle, we will address that, make sure that all that landscaping is going to be low growing, not to impede the site triangle.
You mentioned the site triangle, and then you mentioned it briefly with respect to a vinyl fence that was added. You can just reference to show where that, if any, the vinyl fence was added.
Yeah, well, we have it around the refuse enclosure, and then, see if I can zoom in on it. There is a vinyl fence that runs along the property line, adjoining the two residential property lines. So it's the two, I guess, the side and the two property lines that don't front on the street. So obviously there'd be no fence along the street line, because that wouldn't be permitted in the front yard.
Now, with respect to the garbage, I just want to go back to the garbage enclosure. One of the concerns or comments was whether or not we would increase the coverage, the impervious coverage. You just mentioned that it did not, so I just wanted you to highlight that.
Yeah, so it was a slight increase. It did not put it over the allowable. And we did check our drainage calculations, so the slight increase in impervious, we didn't need to add any capacity to our stormwater system. So stormwater runoff will still be controlled, still be within the permitted runoff.
I have nothing further at this time.
At this time, are there any board members that would like to question Mr. Gallerano's testimony?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So you mentioned that when the ambulance would arrive, that they wouldn't be able to go underneath, only if they'll be able to turn on the handicap space, correct?
Yeah, let me go back to the site plan, because I don't have the...
Just for the record, too, I should have, by housekeeping, I marked A9, which was the number we left off at, the revised site plan that was submitted, I think dated through January 13th of 2013, consisting of the 7 sheets. So that's A9 for the record.
Thank you.
So this is sheet 3 of the revised site plans, and down in the lower left-hand corner, we put turning templates onto the plan to show how an ambulance could basically have 2 turning movements. It could pull into the driveway. It would be then completely off of the street, or it could pull into the handicap spot if that was open, because both of those areas are outside of the covered building area. So again, they wouldn't need to pull it, go under the building. They have 2 areas where they could park if they needed to be off-site. Again, they could also be on the street. That's not unusual for an ambulance to be on the street in an emergency situation. But in this case, we have 2 areas that they can access.
So if the handicap space were to be occupied, how would they?
Well, then they would go in the other spot. Then they would stage in the driveway. So kind of gave 2 areas where they could park. One could be in the handicap, one could be in the driveway. So if somebody was in the handicap spot, then they could stage themselves in the driveway.
Have you guys seen the radius that they're able to get out or pull into another parking lot space if they needed to get out of there?
Yeah, well, they would pull straight in, and then they would back out. So they wouldn't turn around in the parking lot. They would pull in, and then they would back out the same way they pulled in. So
I mean, they would block the entire parking lot then, if the
They-
handicap space was occupied.
I hear they would.
Meaning they would block the entire parking lot.
They would block, yeah. I mean, again, in an emergency situation, they would block the parking lot. Just like if there was a fire, the fire engine would probably block the entire street. So.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other board questions? Ms. Scott?
I'm not sure if it's a question for this section, because you was talking about targeted tenants. So is that a question for, because I know you're doing both, but that was part of the planning part.
Yeah, I mean, I can answer that now. I mean, I was going to get more into that in the planning testimony, but I certainly, if you have a question, I can
Okay.
answer it.
Because when you say targeted tenants, I'm just under the impression that tenants will almost say anything it is that they need to say to get into a place. So even though they may say they may not have any vehicles, and, you know, later on decide that they want to have one vehicle or two vehicles, is the property going to have a management on site, or will the property be managed along with off-site management, like not there? So nobody will actually know, you know, what's going on until somebody makes a complaint.
Yeah, that's a good question. I did talk to the owner about that. And, you know, it's 9 units. They wouldn't have like an on-site manager. It's just not large enough to warrant that. The owner will monitor, though, what goes on the site, make frequent visits. He plans on having security cameras that he can monitor the site remotely, just to see what's going on, make sure, again, talking about the refuse area, make sure that that is being handled properly or being used properly, be able to see how many cars are in the parking lot. Again, you know, I think, again, we're targeting that tenant. I mean, if somebody had multiple cars, yeah, they could lie, but it wouldn't really be a suitable place for them. I mean, it'd be more suitable for them to look somewhere else. And the owner will have to monitor that. I mean, again, if somebody isn't following the rules, that's going to be part of the tenant, part of the lease. And if they're not living up to the lease, then they would be asked to leave. You know, and that's, the owner would have to monitor that.
Well, I mean, you wouldn't have it in the lease that, because if a person has two vehicles and they only occupy one parking spot, they could still have a vehicle outside and park on the street. But at any given moment, if they wanted to park on the premises, that would become a problem.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't stop them from having 3 cars, but again, like, I'm not sure, again, it wouldn't be a suitable place for somebody with multiple cars, right? I mean, obviously, they could rent there and go park in the street, but, I mean, given a choice, if you could rent here or rent somewhere that had proper on-site parking, maybe even covered parking, you know, you have a choice, right? I mean, can't say somebody wouldn't still move here, but given a choice where another place was more suitable for their needs, you would think they would gravitate more towards there. So,
Will parking be free?
I believe so, but I can't tell you 100%.
Okay, thank you.
I'll check with the owner. I'll circle back on that for you later.
Thank you.
Ms. Alexander?
Yes, I was just concerned, nine apartment units, everyone gets 1 parking space. So there are 3 parking spaces left, that's across the street. Like, everybody gets an assigned parking spot, right, on the premises. And
Yeah,
then they can
everybody
park.
would get 1 spot assigned, and then there would be 3 open for visitors. And then if somebody did have a second car, then they would be able to park across the street. That would be a spot that they would have to be able to use.
So if I can, Board Member, I think the question was whether or not the 3 was across the street, but the 3 additional would be
sorry.
on-site. So
Yeah,
there are a
okay.
total of 12 on-site parking spaces.
Oh, right on
Oh,
site.
sorry, yeah, the 3 visitors would be on site, correct.
And to me, I don't know, I guess you can find people who only have 1 car, but at most, I would think 2 cars per home, 18 parking spaces, it would seem like, when you don't
Well-
think that's,
The trend in the state is less cars, right? People are, I mean, that is a trend, that is a goal of the state, basically pretty much the whole country, almost the world, to reduce cars, reduce emissions, reduce gas consumption, and all that. So the trend is less cars. And again, this is only a 9-unit building, so we're not looking to trying to rent 100 units. We really just need 9 people that like to walk, right? Which I don't think is that difficult today. I mean, people do like to walk. There are people who do like to have less cars. I mean, I wish I could get rid of a car. Believe me, I would get rid of my second car in 2 seconds, but unfortunately I can't because me and my wife are both commute. So, again, I think we could find 9 people who want, or 9, be able to rent 9 units where you would find tenants that have a desire to walk, have a desire to have less cars. And the people who have less cars tend to gravitate to this kind of a building because they do have the services they can walk to, they have the mass transit, so it's a fit, right? It's a fit for that type of a person. Somebody who doesn't care about mass transit or doesn't care about walking somewhere, then they have more choices. There's 100 places they could rent. I mean, people will gravitate to this building who want that kind of an atmosphere, or that kind of a climate. So, I mean, that's the goal, right? That was the vision of the building.
I think that's a difficult goal. I really do, but I'll listen further.
Look, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the parking when I get into the planning testimony. I mean, I'll talk about some of the statistics and data that's out there that does actually support the less parking spaces.
All right, thank you.
Yep,
All right,
thank
and
you.
I was going to add, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Gallerano, you weren't here for the November 16th hearing that we had where your colleague testified as the engineer, correct?
I was not here, that's correct.
Okay. And you're going to offer planning testimony, I understand, and we'll address some of those details in planning, because I don't want to redo the whole record, as it were. I mean, we had exhaustive exchange with the engineering testimony that's already a part of the record.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I will get more into that in the planning testimony.
And so clarification, that's the reason why we wanted only to address the revisions that were made, because we understand that Mr. Cueto provided testimony as far as the civil component, but we did not present our traffic engineer, nor did we present our planner.
No, I understand, but we did spend a good part of the evening with the engineer as it pertained to concerns about the parking lot. I want to make sure the board and public knows that those details are in this record. Mr. Gallerano was not the proponent of the expert testimony that came into the record. It was his colleague, of which he was not here to address. So those details in your notes, in your recollection, are still relevant to what you're deliberating tonight.
Are there any other board members?
I have a question. It just seems highly questionable that each household would only have one vehicle. I know in my household it's 3, and I would think most households have at least 2 cars and 2 drivers.
Sure. Again, these are apartments. If these are residents, homes, I would say, yeah, it might be more likely they would have more cars. These are predominantly 1-bedrooms. There's 7 1-bedroom apartments and 2 2-bedroom apartments. So, again, yeah, there's a possibility, but again, the target, again, what they want to do is to attract tenants that have less cars, right? That's the way they want to promote this building. This is the way they're going to advertise this building and market this building to people who have less cars, people who want, again, be in walking distance to services, be walking distance to mass transit, and not have to have the cars. So, again, the idea is to attract people who don't have multiple cars, right? I mean, that's the idea here, is to bring those tenants in and to try to attract those type of tenants to this building. And those type of people, again, people with less cars, they do gravitate to this kind of building because they have the services that they can walk to, the mass transit, and those things. So, yeah, again, you can find that houses that have multiple cars, but that's not what they're looking to do here.
And I just wanted to clarify, and I know you're going to delve this more into your planning testimony and talking about the reliance in the report in the RSIS, and it starts about the mass transit, the availability of other available local mass transit that you're going to testify to. So there is there's discussion in the RSIS about the availability of mass transit in order to address this one car and the requirements for any parking standards, to address the parking requirements.
Yeah, correct. The RSIS does allow for adjustments based on environmental conditions, right? So they have their standards, they start with their baseline, but then they do have provision that based on circumstances for a specific site, a board can accept a lower standard. In this case, again, location of mass transit, location of neighborhood services, those are things that a board can consider when weighing in on the parking variance.
Mr. Wiley, you have a
You
question?
said you're going to be targeting those people that only have one car? How are you going to target them? And what's going to guarantee that you're not going to get a number of people with two cars? And if you do get those people with two cars, that overflow, where's it going to go?
So again, it's going to be in the marketing, right? So when the building is out there, they're looking to rent, and they're going to market the building, they're going to market it that way, as what we call like a walkable building. That's the term that's used, pedestrian-friendly building. And again, looking to, the building, again, is being made attractive, or the location is attractive to people who have less cars. So somebody who had multiple cars, like I was saying before, probably isn't a good place for them. There's other buildings that would be more suitable if you had 2 or 3 cars, where you wouldn't have to worry about going out on the street and trying to find a spot, right? So nobody wants to come home at night and have to circle around the block 6 times to find a parking spot, right? You want to be able to pull into a parking lot and have your spot there when you need it. And there's buildings out
Excuse me.
there that have that. I mean,
Thank you.
buildings that aren't near mass transit, buildings that aren't near a downtown are required to have more parking. They're usually required to have what the RSIS requires. Reductions in parking are typically allowed or permitted in areas that justify it. And the justifications are like transit villages, access to mass transit, access to public facilities, access to neighborhood services. Those are the sites that where a reduction in parking is typically allowed. And that's, again, what your master plan also points that out, that reduction in parking is encouraged in those locations, not encouraged across the board. Your master plan's not saying give everybody a reduction in parking, right? They're saying, the master plan is saying a reduction in parking is suitable where you have this situation, mass transit, access to services, encouragement for use of bicycles and things like that. So, yeah, it's not suitable everywhere, but this site is, again, a site that I believe is suitable and, again, consistent with the goals of the master plan.
Yeah, but that doesn't guarantee that.
No,
you're gonna
it
get
doesn't.
that.
No, nothing's guaranteed. I mean, we can't
That's what I'm
guarantee
saying.
it. We can only, target that and work towards that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Benavenga.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Let's revert back to garbage collection. You mentioned about, you didn't know what you guys were going to use, 95-gallon cans, which on the wheels, or dumpsters. Let's just say you went with the cans. You're talking 9 units, 9 cans, right, 1 per unit. Then that's just for garbage only, and then we have to take in consideration for recyclables. So that's 18 barrels, let's just say?
No, what we're doing is we're not looking to assign, we're not looking to assign 1 can to each unit. So it's based on the total volume, right? So we looked at what would be the projected volume, and it's just, and then how to provide that volume. So, we could put in 2 3-yard dumpsters, right? Which would be suitable for the amount of units, and that's just based on 1 pickup per week. Could always go to 2 pickups per week if really needed, but just 2 3-yard dumpsters would be suitable for recycling and for refuse for the entire complex. If we did go with cans, the 6 cans would be equivalent to the dumpsters, right? So it's just based on volume. So it's not like everybody's going to get an assigned can. Everybody puts the garbage in the refuse area. They just, wherever can is empty, that's where they put it.
All right, so let's say we did go with the 2 3-yard dumpsters. Pickup time, they'd have to be moved into an area where that truck could dump it, based on the clearance we're talking here? So they would have to be moved out into, like, say, the driveway area or the parking area?
Right, they would be rolled out.
Right, and so a truck that dumps it's kind of big in that area, down Montclair, would say, they'd have to pull the dumpster, stay out into the driveway area to dump it?
Yeah, the truck would stage in the driveway area, not go under the building, but would stage in the driveway area. The cans would be, if there were cans, they would be rolled out. Either way.
Dumpsters would have to be moved out, right?
They would be rolled out, yeah. But these are 3 yards. They're small. They're 6 foot by 4 foot. They're on they're on casters, and they roll out.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Any other board questions? Hearing none. At this time, Are there any members of the public that would like to come forward and question the testimony of Mr. Anthony Gallerano? Only his testimony, not your opinion, just the testimony that he has given. Yes, sir.
My name is Floyd Patterson. I live at 168 Warloff Place in Vauxhall, New Jersey. I noticed in the original plan there was something for electric vehicles. I think you had 2 spots or something for that. How does that affect the parking area, the parking allotment?
Right. The concept is that the anticipation, again, this is a state requirement, right? So we don't have a choice, right? This isn't a choice that the applicant has. The state imposed regulations not too long ago that any building over 6 units has to have electrical charging stations. So they don't necessarily have to be designated for electric vehicles. They're there for an electric vehicle. So if somebody had an electric vehicle, they would be obviously they would be assigned that spot. It would make the most sense. If you had 9 tenants and none of them had electric vehicles, then it wouldn't matter where they parked. So again, that's up to the owner. He needs to manage his parking. I was saying before, it's up to him to manage where people park, how they park.
So if you had a person there with 3 electric cars in the apartment, in that unit, someone would go without a space, right? You're saying?
Right, so everybody gets 1 spot. If they have a second car, then they would park across the street. The owner has secured 5 spots in the office building across the street. So again, that's when a prospective tenant comes here to talks to the owner. Owner's going to make it clear you're getting 1 spot in the parking lot. If you have a second car, you have to park across the street, and that's a choice they'll make if they want to walk or not walk across the street. And again, the idea is that this building will be attractive to people who don't have 2 cars.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Hi, good evening. Kim Eason, 327 Revere Avenue in Union. Can we go back to the garbage, please, Mr. Chairman? I just wanted to understand, did you indicate that there would be only 1 pickup per week?
I'm sorry, I can answer that. Can I just clarify that? Sure. I believe it was, again, Marshmore for the record, I believe it was stipulated the last time that it would be 2 pickups, and I confirmed it with my client that there would be 2 pickups per week. I believe that was the testimony at the last hearing.
Yeah, I was only pointing out that when we based our volume calculations, we only based it on 1 pickup per week. So obviously 2 pickups per week is going to make it more than adequate. So we kind of worked in a factor of safety. We didn't want to, base it on 2 pickups. We figured even if it was 1 pickup, it would still work. The second pickup, it just makes it even better.
Thank you. Back to Mr. Bentavenu's question, and if I misstate you, please accept my apology. Can you please re-explain the size of the garbage cans and how each resident is to dispose of their garbage?
Okay, so yeah, we looked at, there's 2 options, right, that we see. Again, it depends on who the hauler is, right? Every garbage hauler has their own methods, and it could be, again, 2 small dumpsters that would roll out, or it could be like we call 95-gallon cans. They're rectangular, but they're 95 gallons. They're extra large, right? They're larger usually than most people have in their house, and they would be pulled out also by the hauler. So the cans are there. They're not assigned to any particular unit. They're just people go in. Wherever can is empty, that's where they would put the garbage.
Because we have a problem with infestation of rats in that area today, how is the owner going to address that based on the size of the cans, the number of tenants, and any overflow of garbage?
So these are closed. I mean, these have lids. They're not open. We are providing, again, adequate volume. We're providing more volume than we need, specifically for that reason. That's why I said I looked at it on a conservative basis, right? So we're trying to, we'll pretty much guarantee not to have that overflow because we pretty much have more than double the capacity that we need. The owner, again, he'll monitor the situation, right? He visits the site, he's going to have remote security cameras. He will have a camera where he can see the refuse area. He can monitor remotely. If somebody is not following the rules, that has to be corrected, right? If somebody continues not to follow the rules, then they'll be asked to leave, right? Because then they're in violation of the terms of their lease.
Mr. Chairman, I only have two more questions.
Fine.
Does the owner or yourself live in the Vauxhall Union area?
I do not.
Are you familiar with that area where you're proposing this building?
I'm familiar. I can't say I'm an expert in it, but I've been working in Union County area as a consultant for the last 25 years. So I am familiar. I can't say I'm an expert in it, but I have done work in Union, numerous projects in Union, so I am somewhat familiar with it.
And then, I'm sorry, one last question. It's regarding who is responsible for responding to fires? Is it Union or Maplewood?
So my conversations with the fire department, the Maplewood would respond to a building fire. Union would respond to a parking lot fire. But I can tell you the way fire departments work, they work with mutual aid, which means that if there's a fire, usually most of the surrounding towns will respond anyway. So if there was a fire in the building, probably Maplewood would consider to be when I say like the lead, agency. Union would probably respond anyway, because again, they have mutual aid between the towns and the county. So they all help each other.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Good evening, Johnny Rosser, 2914 Vauxhall Road, Vauxhall. Question, in terms of the parking spots across the street, where exactly are we talking about across the street?
So we're going to have our traffic engineer who's going to come up and testify. He's going to get into more details of that. So
Okay.
it might be a better question
Right.
for him.
The other thing is, and you said you're familiar with the area, you've pointed out on numerous occasions about this being transit-friendly, because you have the bus lines on Springfield Avenue and also Milburn Avenue. Given the fact that this building and the parking spots that you're talking about, they're across the street from a state highway and a transit corridor. So those people would be parking across the street, across the state highway, and crossing the transit corridor. Is that correct?
That's correct. They would have to cross Springfield Avenue and Milburn Avenue.
Okay, both of them.
Yes.
Secondly, in terms of the fire, with the fire, you said there was a possibility with the mutual aid. Were you aware of the fire that did occur in that area a number of years ago, where both fire departments didn't know which one, and 41 families got burnt out on Oswald Place?
I'm not aware of that, but again, I did speak to the fire department, and they made it pretty clear that they were going to establish their responsibilities.
Right.
They were very aware that this is in two towns and that there's going to be coordination. So I'm not saying I'm an expert in firefighting, but based on my discussions with the fire prevention officer, he seemed to be very aware of the situation and what needed to be done. So,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
But do you know if Maplewood Fire Department is a volunteer or paid?
It's a good question. I do not know that.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, my name is Robert Williams. Can y'all hear me back there? Okay, because we couldn't hear y'all back, to be honest with you. Robert Williams, 330 Russell Street, Vauxhall, New Jersey, in Vauxhall. Okay, quite a things I want to address. First of all, you don't know if Maplewood is volunteer or not, correct?
I do not know.
Okay. You spoke to Maplewood, you said, right?
I spoke to Union.
Spoke to Union?
Union.
Okay,
right.
so let me give you a little information about Union. It's my opinion, it's a fact. Between November and, say, last month, the Vauxhall, basically the Union Fire Department, came down Montclair Avenue over a dozen times, okay? Down Montclair Avenue, okay? So Montclair Avenue, you're talking about parking, because you jumped around a lot of different things, and I'm trying to keep it all clear in my head. There's no parking on that side of Montclair Avenue. I don't know where a car's going to park at, first thing. The other thing I want to say to you was about the ambulance. You said they're going to pull in, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So when somebody's in the building, you got to come out, ambulance is in the rear. So when they have to back in, or if they drive in, you got to back out onto Springfield Avenue, which is a major street. So now you get somebody to, like the police, to stop traffic, correct?
Yeah, I mean, typically there's 2 people on an ambulance.
Usually 2 ambulances too.
It could be. Again, I don't know how they would respond.
Once again, no disrespect to you. You don't know how to respond to answer the question we're asking you. You're from Cranford. You're not from the town of Vauxhall, where we see everything every time. You say you've done buildings in Union. You're not familiar with Vauxhall, are you?
I'm not an expert in it. I'm familiar with the area.
You're not an expert of
Right.
Vauxhall. You're an expert of
Right.
Union, correct?
Right. So I'm basing one of my conversation with the Fire Prevention Bureau. I have to believe they're the professionals in this town who are put in place to protect the town. They put for fire, rescue. So I'm not going to question their ability. If the
Neither
fire
am I,
department,
but I'm not
the fire
questioning
department
the
tells
ability
me that they can service this building, they can get in the building, they can address a fire, they can address a medical emergency. There's no reason for me to believe that they can't do that. They're the professionals. They're the people who are in place. I'm not a professional. I'm not sure if you're a fire prevention professional or a medical professional. We have to rely on them. They're the people that were hired. They're the people who have the training, and I'm not going to question their ability at any given moment.
And relying on you that developed this. So let's rely on your personal stuff you can do. You're saying the garbage is about how big again?
Yeah, we can fit 2 3-cubic yard dumpsters, or we
Okay.
can fit 6 95-gallon cans.
Okay, and who's going to pull it out to the curb?
It's going to be the hauler, whoever
The
they
hauler.
hire. Correct.
Have you ever pulled that weight in the snow?
Again,
I'm just
the
asking a
garb-
question.
again, I'm not a garbage hauler. I'm going to say that the garbage haulers do this every day. I mean, we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not putting something in place that suddenly hasn't been done before.
That
Garbage
is
companies
correct.
pick up garbage every day of the week.
That is
And I'm
correct.
sure that the parking lot is going to be plowed. They're not going to be pulling cans through 3 feet of snow. The owner's going to plow the driveway, and they'll pull it through a plowed driveway. They're not going to come out in the middle of a snowstorm with 3 feet of snow on the ground and try to pull cans through the snow. I wouldn't expect them to do that. I'm sure the owner wouldn't expect them to do that.
So when the company does come and plow on Montclair and Springfield Avenue, they plow it towards the curb. Did you know that?
The town or I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Yeah, when
Sure,
the township, they plow.
Right.
Come down Montclair Avenue. So you can't park on that side like I was explaining earlier. So the snow gonna go on that side. If you come down Springfield Avenue, which is a state street, have to keep that clear because of the street, they gonna park the snow on the curb too, so they can't get the garbage can out. So getting back to the garbage can real quick, you said 2 pickups.
right, 2 per week.
Well, in the town of Vauxhall, they have a pickup, we have a bulk every day on Monday, every day, every day of the month. They have cardboard, they have garbage. So you will need 3 dumpsters for regular garbage, plastic, and cardboard. Now, you're saying only 2. And you're saying that the owner will monitor this, sitting in his home, looking at TV and saying, okay, oh, it's snowing outside. I'm not going there. But you got to rely on you saying what people will do. And if they don't fit the bill that you're saying for this part you want to do, then they can't be there. Isn't that considered as discrimination? You're targeting certain people. You're saying people and targeting. That's kind of very vague and very hurtful. By you're targeting certain people to be there. 1 second, ma'am. You're targeting people to come to this thing. So you're going to put it out there that for those who do not want to walk, this is my opinion, I'm just going back to what you're saying. Those who want to walk and ride bike come to Maplewood and Vauxhall. But as you said, you have 2 vehicles. You had 1, but you have 2. Correct? So you cannot actually say, well, he can't come stay with us because, you know what, he has 2 vehicles. Or the electrical, it says in the paperwork that you wrote up that there's 5 units. 1 electrical booth is for two parking spaces. So you're now down to 3. So now, you can have an electric car, you can. So now you're being discrimination about who can have an electric car. In the year 2035, they want everything electrical. That's how many years from now? Just do the math.
If I can just jump in, because I think the question's being tainted. That is not the testimony.
Yes, it
I believe
was.
the testimony was that the New Jersey has imposed a requirement for EV spaces that mandates that we provide an
And one
EV parking
station
space.
with
If
2
you let me
cars.
finish, I did allow you to finish. Let
No,
me.
you jumped in, but go ahead.
Because I wanted to clarify, but please do not interrupt me. That was the testimony. I think the question, and I would ask the chair, the question should be posed to my witness as to what he said, not his personal, where we all live, where if we don't live in Vauxhall, if he can pull a garbage can. He testified regarding the plans that we've submitted, and I believe the question should be geared to that. But I just wanted to clarify, the word targeting was the testimony was to address the marketing of the building. I believe that's what Ms. Scott indicated, who we use the word targeting, but it's the marketing of the building. As to what the overall design and intent was to who we would market this building to. That is not discrimination. Just wanted to clarify the record that the EV spaces are mandated by the state of New Jersey. That was imposed by Governor Murphy, I believe, over a year ago.
Okay, now going back to what I was saying then. So the 5 spots, okay, this is an expert, the 5 spots that's under, what's the name? Should be 1 electrical box there, correct?
Wait,
Is
say
that
it
what the
again.
plan
I
say?
didn't hear you.
1 electrical? In the plans, there's 1 electrical area for electric car,
Yeah,
correct?
yes.
Well,
No,
by
there's
the
actually, no, I'm sorry, there's 2 EVs.
There's 2 EVs.
Right.
So 2 EVs, if you look at it, and this is not my opinion, it's fact, that 1 EV station is considered as 2 spots.
Oh, you're talking about the credit. So the state, talk about the credit that the state gives? Is that what?
Well, 2 vehicles is 2, I mean, 2 spots is 2 spots. So you go from 5, you do 1, that's down to 3.
But the spots are available. We're not like saying the spots aren't available. If there were no EV cars in the building, then
There isn't?
anybody would park there.
There isn't?
We don't know.
Yeah,
We
just
don't know
to
yet.
clarify,
So-
the state mandates an electric vehicle charging station. They're providing one. Under the law, under the state law, when they provide that electric vehicle capability, they get credit for 1 less spot. So your question is relevant as it pertains to the parking variance in the context of the D1U. So you made your point there. And just for everybody's benefit, the public will have an opportunity to make opinions and comments at the end. I don't want to go too far afield.
I understand.
You had some
Apologize.
relevant questions for sure based on the site plan testimony. But the EV space is mandated by the state, and then they get a credit, as it were, for 1 less space. So
Okay.
the shortage is there, and that's what we're addressing. I mean,
Yes, so
that's-
that means if there's 1 spot and there's 2 vehicles there, and this is not my opinion, I apologize, it takes a half an hour to 10 hours to charge a vehicle. That's,
Well, the
Facts.
other variable about the state law that the state hasn't figured out yet and is leaving it up to the localities is you're not supposed to keep the car in the space after the vehicle charges. So
Correct.
the other variable is you're expected, once the vehicle charges, to remove it from the space. That's under the law. So that's still a work in progress, as I understand it legally. But to answer your question, I think, and what the applicant is expected to do, 1 space is provided for the electrical vehicle charging, and when they do that, they get a credit of 1 space under the Township of Union's criteria for the number of spaces. They still need a variance, they're still short, but it's 1 less space, and that's the number that we're dealing with.
okay, so getting to the question before, you said parking. You have parking in the front, correct?
Parking where, in the front?
In front of the building.
Oh, yeah, along the building, correct.
Along the building, what side of the building are they allowed to park on?
They're parked in the designated parking spots. So if you go up, look up on the plan, there's 12 designated parking spots, and they can,
Okay.
9 of them will be assigned, 3 of them will be open for visitors. They can only park in those designated spots.
I can't really see what designated spot is, can you point out?
Yeah, so, In the back, yeah, in the parking lot, there's 12 parking spots, and they're striped, so they,
The fence that they just put up there.
right.
The new fence that the owner just put up there. It wasn't there before, just put it up there. So now the garbage, you said, is gonna be in the back also, correct? Where it is marked in the back there?
Yeah, right where that concrete pad is, yeah.
Concrete, that's on Springfield Avenue, that's not in the back, on Springfield Avenue.
It's in the side, it depends what you call it, a side or a back, but it's along the side of the building.
That's Springfield Avenue.
It's what?
That's Springfield Avenue. That's the front of the building.
Yeah, well, not really.
Yes, it is.
It's not facing the front, it's on the side of the building.
What street is this right here? This right here is the side, right? This is Montclair Avenue?
That's Springfield Avenue where you're pointing.
Right here?
That's Springfield.
Right here.
Yeah, that's facing
So
Springfield.
this is then, the parking is on Hilton Avenue side? Or Lower Avenue? What side is that? This is Springfield Avenue, this is parking, that's the church behind it. Is that correct?
The parking lot comes off of Montclair Avenue.
Of Montclair Avenue, okay.
Yeah, so,
Where's Montclair Avenue at? I'm trying to figure out.
so if you look at the exhibit, up to the top is Montclair Avenue, right?
Montclair Avenue's up here.
Right up there, and that's where the driveway is coming into,
Driveway's coming down this way.
right, it's coming in from
It's
Montclair.
one-way or two-way coming in? How do cars come in and go out?
They come in and they go out the same driveway.
So you come in right here?
Yeah, I don't have.
You have
I
to
don't
stay
have-
by the
I don't know if
microphone
I
because I
can-
got to pick you up.
I apologize.
No
Yeah,
problem.
Because I can't see the.
Let me, actually, let me use the pointer.
Yeah,
So,
good point.
here's the driveway area right here. See that? They come in and out through here.
The driveway on Montclair Avenue, the driveway, that's on the street of Montclair Avenue then?
It's Montclair Avenue, right. Here's Montclair Avenue, and
Okay.
here's the driveway.
Okay,
So they
the
come
driveway's
in,
in front of the building.
I'm not sure what you mean. The building predominantly fronts on Springfield Avenue.
So it's
and
on the
it
side of
fronts-
the building then?
And it fronts on Montclair Avenue. So there's two frontages. This is the frontage along, find my pointer. This is the building line along Montclair Avenue.
Mhm.
This is the building line along Springfield Avenue. This portion of the building right here, where you see this line here, this
Mhm.
solid line, that overhangs over the parking lot. So portion of the parking lot is actually under the building.
So you're parking under the building, so if that's Montclair Avenue, then the parking space is on Montclair Avenue and on Springfield Avenue. The parking spaces.
The parking spaces are in the parking lot. There's no spaces
Well, it said
on
parking lot, so the parking lot's in front of Montclair Avenue and Springfield Avenue?
No. The building is, let me go. This is Springfield Avenue, right?
Correct.
This is the building here. See
Yes.
this outline? What I'm outlining, right, this is the parking lot. The parking lot is behind the building. If you were looking at the building from Springfield Avenue, if you were standing right here, looking at the building, the parking lot would be behind it. You wouldn't even see it.
Mr. Galliano.
If you're
not-
standing on,
I'm sorry to interrupt. I think he's asking, when you're saying there's 9 designated spots,
right.
he wants to know the spots on the street.
No,
that-
they're
that
all
are
they're all in the parking lot. All of the parking is in the
That parking-
parking lot. There's 12 spots.
The 12 spots there, how big are the parking spots?
They're 9 by 18,
9 by 18.
That's a standard.
9 wide by 18 wide.
18 long,
And you have 12 of them.
12 of them. And that's a standard parking spot, 9 by
Yes, the standard
18.
is 18, I know that.
Yeah,
And a
okay.
car, a standard car is 18 by 14, a compact is 14 by what's name? I do a little research
Mm-hmm.
too. I don't understand how the parking is going to fit there on Montclair Ave, the cars coming in. And then you have cars parking under, you said, right?
Well, the building goes over the parking.
So overhang.
Right, it doesn't interfere with the parking.
Okay, I'll go talk to planning because I want to jump into the planning, but I thought this is storage. Where's the storage going to be at? Underground, or where's the
Yeah,
storage going to be?
that's in the building. That's not
Storage
out.
is in the building.
Yeah, the architect can go into that a little bit more detail if you'd like, but it's in the building, it's not in the parking lot. The storage is in the building.
So there's no basement. There's going to be there's no basement, like they said before in the paperwork.
If you want more detail, I'll let the architect.
So if I can, the architect can testify, sir. Last week, we can bring him back to clarify, but I believe that was the question. This is my civil engineer. Thank you.
Sure.
To what you said as you interrupted Mr. Williams. Kim Eason, 327 Revere Avenue. It is, I know, wait, no opinion, right?
No,
The
no,
reason
just the
I'm-
testimony that he has
So I
given.
just need to understand, you don't reside in the area, the owner does not reside in the area, and you really have limited knowledge about the complexity of this area. Is that a fair question, yes or no, please?
I don't know what you mean by the complexity
do
of the
not-
area.
Because you allude to the fact that, I'm going to finish, please. Please.
I just
We
wanna
let
make
you,
an
no, I'm going to
objection
allude
we
to
were
the
ex-
fact.
What's your objection?
Again, we're all experts, professionals. It is not irrelevant whether or not the civil engineer resides in the town in the testimony that he's provided.
No, his testimony specifically says that we are targeting people because we believe, based on the area and transportation, that people will be able to walk, people will be able to bicycle, and people will be able to do things in the area. The reason the question is being asked if you or the owner reside in the area, because Springfield Avenue is not an area where you want to ride a bike. There are no shopping stores, grocery stores, or healthy places on Springfield Avenue if I'm walking to go shopping. Is there transportation? There are buses, absolutely. There is no train station. Buses will take you to train stations, and so it is germane if they reside in the area or have a knowledge of the area, because if you did, I don't think you would continue to say we are targeting and marketing to people that will be willing to walk and bicycle, because that area is not built for that. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, yes, ma'am.
A little short here. Hello, my name is Ellen Charles. I reside at 358 Russell Street in Vauxhall, New Jersey, of course. One of my questions are, you have 9 residents, right? 9, sir?
Well, 9 units.
9
yeah.
units. Okay, 9 parking spots. Now, if it's 2, 3, or 4 people, whatever, in an apartment, where do they park, or where do they go after there's no more spots to park?
So 70 of these units are one-bedrooms. The owner's not going to allow 4 people to
right, the
occupy a
two-bedroom.
one-bedroom. Two-bedroom unit, again, it's only 2 bedrooms. Again, we can't prevent, again, tell somebody they can't have 3 cars. The idea is that we don't want people to have 3 cars. We want people to rent here that don't want to have 3 cars. I mean, that's was my testimony.
But you can't prevent that. So
We
say you
can't
have
tell
18
somebody how many cars they can
Suppose you
own.
have 18 cars.
Yep.
Where are the other 9 supposed to go? On Montclair Avenue, or walk across that busy street that you were speaking about?
How many cars would you think somebody would have? 8?
2. That's
Oh,
what-
2.
Right. I'm doing
Yeah,
that.
it's a possibility. Again, a second car, we do have spots across the street where they could park.
Okay, suppose they don't park there, and they invade the parking spots on Montclair Avenue, interrupting the regular residents that's been there. Now they come home for work, and they're in their spot. Now what? They're not going to go across the street on that busy intersection if they see a spot on Montclair Avenue. Oh, here's a spot. It's not yours. Those people have been there for years. So who's going to prevent them, anybody, even the visitors that they have, from parking in the regular area? They're not going to go across that
Yeah,
street.
again, the owner can't prevent somebody from parking in the street. They can't prevent somebody from having 3
True,
cars. but
that's where the
not-
problem's going to come in.
But that's not, again, what the owner wants in his building, and that's not what he's going to encourage.
Well, he don't want it, but he's going to get it.
Well, listen, somebody can move into a neighborhood, buy a house, move in, and have 6 cars. I mean, then what do you can't tell those people they can't park in the street. So, I mean, the idea is you can't control that.
Most
Nobody
people
can
don't have
control that.
6 cars, a regular family.
Well, Again,
Well,
you're projecting, you're doing a what-if scenario, so I'm giving you a what-if scenario. What if somebody moved into a house and had 6 cars? It would be the same situation. But you have an owner here that isn't encouraging
So you're creating
it.
a problem, so a problem's going to be created before it even starts. Basically.
You're assuming it'll be a problem.
No, it will be.
well,
Let me
that's-
tell you, I live on Russell Street. I have a business, a daycare center there, okay? It's hard for the parking also there. There's people that live up towards Springfield Avenue. They bring their cars all the way down Russell Street. People on Montclair Avenue are already parking on Russell Street. So we're all fighting for spots. There's cones out everywhere. It's like, this is my spot. Then when the snow comes, like the young man said, oh, that's even worse. It's even worse. So,
Well, there are houses that don't have driveways, that don't have garages, so some people are forced to park in
but
the
you're
street.
talking a whole unit in one spot, a whole
Right.
big unit.
But we're providing,
talking
again,
one
we're
house.
providing parking. Well,
Okay,
some
but you-
houses don't have driveways, some houses
Okay,
don't
but you're
have-
looking at one house, a
How many-
family. Here, you're looking at none with other people in it.
No, I'm saying under existing conditions. Not every house has a driveway or a garage. So some people, again, even under current conditions, have to park in the street. The owner is providing
Right.
parking. So we're not telling people to go park on the street. We're not relying on
They're
on-street
not going to
parking.
walk all the way across Springfield Avenue. People die and get hit by cars over there. And it's late at night, you don't know what time people's working or anything. So you're going to be walking on dangerous street, crossing over,
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that people are dying and our traffic engineers.
Oh, they are.
Well, our traffic
They are,
engineer-
they are.
Our
Because you're
traffic
not in the
engineer-
area. 'Cause
Our
you're not in
traffic
the area.
engineer will get into that in a little bit more detail, but they do have, they do have, to cross the street, they have the luxury of a traffic light and crosswalks. They're not dodging cars
bad.
across Springfield Avenue. There's 2 crosswalks, and it's a controlled intersection, almost right in front of the building. So they don't have to, they have a safe place to cross Springfield Avenue. People may cross Springfield Avenue, I don't know what people do now, but in this situation, there's traffic lights and there's crosswalks. We can't do any better than that, than to have a controlled intersection and a crosswalk to cross the street. I mean, other than have a police officer escorting you across the street, can't really do any better than that.
Well, I still say there's a whole cluster. You're looking at a whole cluster, not one family house that somebody moved in and nowhere to park. A whole cluster. And you're looking at 18 cars or better. So 9 to be
There
parked.
will be, there will
9
be a
will be
traffic,
parked.
ma'am, there will
Excuse
be
me?
a traffic engineer who's
It will
going
be
to
a what now?
testify. So we'll have
will
the
provide
opportunity to
testimony.
question.
We're going to talk about the parking in a little more detail later
Right.
also.
This witness
Yeah.
did offer limited testimony, and that's why I made the point, the record from the previous hearing has a lot of this information in it. I know there's a lot of good questions and opinions that are going to be heard tonight. You'll have the opportunity. Right now, we have to try to limit the questions to the testimony that Mr. Gallerano has provided, which was the revisions to the site plan.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am, you'll have a chance at the end of the meeting to express your opinion.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Good evening. Cliff Walker, 363 Russell Street, Vauxhall. My question to you is, if all the tenants have 2 cars, what happens? Where do they park?
They'll have to park, then they'll park across the street.
Right. So my question for that is, you just made a statement that because we have a light and we have a crossway, that is safe. But I just lost a cousin crossing, trying to get to his house on Springfield Avenue. So it's not as safe as you think it is because you're not from Vauxhall. So that needs to be revisited because it's not right. And if you have cars that can't park in the parking lot, they have to go across the street. So as an owner, if I was the owner of that place, I wouldn't want my tenants to have to walk across the street where a place they don't even know and try to cross Springfield Avenue and get hit by a car too. So that makes no sense at all.
Well, again, it comes down to a choice, right? So when this building is built and somebody approaches the owner and wants to rent there, he's going to tell him, you're going to get a spot. And if you have a second car, you need to go across the street. And somebody will make the choice. Do they want to walk across the street? If they don't, then this building isn't suitable for them. We're not trying to make this building everything to everybody. Right, we're looking for to rent 9 units to people who don't want to have multiple cars and who want to be able to walk to different places.
Wouldn't it have been wise to build a building that has more parking spaces for your tenants, opposed to building a building that doesn't have enough parking spaces?
Well, again, I'm going to point back to the master plan, which your own town master plan actually encourages reducing parking. So, I mean, it's not just my opinion, it's the opinion of your planning board, who prepared the master plan, who put that in as one of their goals. to
I think we
reduce
have to
parking.
move along on the master plan testimonies. That's really planning testimony. I mean, I made the point that that's still, I mean, we'll go over that when we hit the planning testimony. I mean, this is still a two-family zone as it pertains to Union, so I will advise this board and the public that the difficulty with the expert's opinion on the master plan, I think, is definitely tempered when you deal with a D1 use variance for multifamily use in a two-family zone. That's the legal key, so we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. All the opinions are noted. We did give a little leeway there on the direct testimony, but, Mr. Chairman, I think we really have to try to keep the questions focused for this witness to move it along.
Fine.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Christine Williams. I'm at 330 Russell Street, Vauxhall, New Jersey, 07088. And this is really just clarification. It's not really a question. Based on the testimony and the plans that we've seen, the parking stalls, they are 18 feet, which don't meet the 20-foot standard, correct?
No, the standard parking spot is 9 by 18. What the RSIS standards we keep referring to is called the Residential Site Improvement Standards, and those are statewide standards that all towns have to abide by. So the state standards say that for a residential use, 9 by 18 is a standard parking spot. However, it stipulates that a car cannot overhang onto a sidewalk unless there's an additional 2 foot in width. So in this case, we're going to provide a bollard in front of each parking spot to prevent the car from overhanging.
So, but you're looking for a design waiver for
No,
that?
that particular item does not require a design waiver.
Okay. And what about the parking setbacks? Have those been satisfied?
That does require a waiver, that's correct.
Okay. So there isn't going to be any maneuvering difficulty within this parking lot
No,
at all
no,
for
we
these
meet
cars?
all of the standards for the parking area.
Okay. And at the end of the day, the deficiency for the parking spaces is not satisfied because you're still suggesting that people park across the street?
Yeah, so we still need a variance. The parking spaces across the street don't eliminate the variance. That's part of our, again, we're going to get into that testimony later, that's part of our, when I say proofs, they call them legal proofs, for granting the variance.
Okay. So basically, the standard for a person having a parking space in connection where they reside does not really flow with this apartment complex because you're requesting that people park in a completely different area.
Well, we're saying that the 12 parking spaces are adequate and that those would be additional spaces if needed. And I'm going to get into, again, as Mr. Pansulo pointed out, we're really kind of getting into the planning testimony. We're going to get into that a little bit more detail later.
Okay. All right, so there's 12 parking spaces. There's not supposed to be 17?
There's actually 16 required. So what the state requirement is, you get a credit for providing EV, right? So
Right.
you get a 1-to-1 credit up to 10% of the parking. So in this case, we get a 1 credit parking. So 17 would be the RSIS. When you bring in the state EV requirements, it's 16.
Right, but there's still a deficiency.
There's a deficiency, absolutely, and we're not saying there's not.
Right,
Yeah.
I'm just clarifying.
Yeah, there
I'm
is.
not
There's still a
debating it. I'm just clarifying that there is still a deficiency.
four-spot deficiency.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Good evening. I'm Marion Colson, 330 Ohio Street, Union, New Jersey. You said you were marketing tenants there because them to be able to walk and bike. Well, I'm a walker and I'm a biker. Vauxhall is not walk-friendly or bike-friendly. I have to go to Maplewood or Millburn to do both. There's no lines in the street. I rode today down Burnett Avenue, sidewalk. up Vauxhall Road, no lines for me to get out in the street. I ended up going in through Maplewood into South Orange. So that is not true, sir. It is not bike-friendly or walk-friendly.
Well, there's sidewalks along Springfield Avenue, so I'll
They're
disagree.
terrible.
I'll
You
disagree.
cannot ride a bike. It's
I'm
too
not saying ride a
bumpy.
bike, but certainly Springfield Avenue is walkable. I mean, there's sidewalks, there's crosswalks,
It's
there's
not
traffic lights.
walk-friendly or bike-friendly. If you get tenants there who want to do that, they will have to go to another town to enjoy that.
Why do you think Springfield Avenue is not walkable?
Because I lived there. I lived
But
on.
again, but what makes it not walkable? There's sidewalks, there's
It's
traffic lights, there's
lumpy.
crosswalks.
For your bike.
Not for a
your
bike, walkable.
Feet walking. I lived on that corner for about 20 years where you're building the homes. Thank God I moved, because it's going to be a catastrophe.
Again,
My name is Jacob Simmons. I live at 251 Oswald Place in Vauxhall. This parking, is it going to be underground, on the building?
No, it's surface parking and the
Oh,
building,
surface
the building's over the top of the parking.
Now, how large an area, first of all, how high is this building going to be?
35 feet, no higher than 35 feet,
So we're talking 2 stories,
correct. 3 stories.
3 stories. So each floor, how many one-bedroom apartments are there?
There's 7 one-bedrooms, 2 two-bedrooms,
So, and there's no underground parking?
no underground.
Okay.
Mr. Williams?
Just want to piggyback what the lady said about Vauxhall. I'm going to read something. A bicyclist who was struck by a motor vehicle early Sunday, early Saturday morning, died as a result of his injuries, according to a press release from Maplewood Police Department. He was struck on Springfield Avenue at 2:30.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to question just the testimony that Mr. Gallerano has given? Hearing none. Ms. Moore, would you like to call your next witness, please?
Yes, this time I'd like to call our traffic engineer.
Can I ask the witness to swear or affirm that the testimony he's going to provide this evening is the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Can you state and spell your name for the record with your business affiliation?
Absolutely. My name is Douglas Poliniak. P is in Peter, Olyniak. I'm a project engineer with Dolan and Dean Consulting Engineers.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Polniak, can you state your professional background and what license venue you hold?
Yes, I'm a graduate from Lehigh University in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering. I acquired that degree in 1998, and since that time, I've been working in the field of traffic engineering. I've been a licensed engineer in the state of New Jersey for approximately the last 19 years. I've testified as a traffic expert before over 100 municipal planning and zoning boards within the state of
The
New Jersey.
board will accept his credentials, Ms. Moore.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Polniak, your firm had an opportunity to prepare a traffic report, traffic impact report. Can you just, I'm sorry, has that been marked? Should we mark that?
The impact statement, the traffic
Yeah.
impact statement is A5, I believe, for the record.
Okay. All right. If you just explain your methodology and then discuss your conclusions.
Sure. I mean, from an overall traffic engineering and impact perspective, the development of 9 apartments is a very low trip generator. However, in order to review the peak period traffic characteristics, the site plan layout, and the parking supply, we prepared the traffic impact statement that was dated January 19th, 2023, as we discussed. As you heard, the property is located along Springfield Avenue eastbound between Laurel Avenue and Montclair Avenue, and access is proposed via one full movement driveway on Montclair Avenue. To review the potential peak hour trip generation to show during the morning, evening, and Saturday when the roadways are at its busiest peak and when the site's at its busiest peak, we reviewed the Institute of Transportation Engineers 11th edition of the Trip Generation Manual. Now that's a manual that calculates trip generation rates for various uses across the states. And for this use, which most applies, is low-rise multifamily housing. Now for 9 units of multifamily housing during the morning commute, rush hour commute, the evening rush hour commute, and as well as Saturday midday shopping peaks, the site would experience a maximum peak hour trip generation of 5 vehicles into and out of the subject driveway. That's very low and essentially imperceptible to the motoring public. But it's also important to state that the Institute of Transportation Engineers as well as the NJDOT both consider a significant increase in traffic as 100 peak hour trips. And they consider that significant because 100 peak hour trips at off-site intersections might have traffic impacts and cause significant delay that may potentially need to be mitigated. This site, as I said, is 5 peak hour trips, which is essentially 5% of that, which is deemed significant, and is equivalent of 1 turning movement into and out of the driveway every 12 minutes. So overall, the sheer volume of sell for the site demonstrates that it'll have a minimal impact when you look at the frequency of vehicles into and out of the site, as well as when you compare it to what the ITE and NJDOT consider significant. Now, we also reviewed the site plan layout. And as I said, access is proposed via a full movement driveway on Montclair Ave that will lead to a 12-space parking lot, which has a 24-foot wide driveway aisle. The parking spaces will be 9 feet wide by 18 feet deep, which meets both the residential site improvement standards and standard ITE dimensions as well. There's been a lot of discussion with respect to the parking supply. The RSIS requires for this land use based on the number of 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, 17 total parking spaces to handle visitor and resident parking. 12 spaces are proposed on-site. However, the site, in my opinion, will have sufficient parking based on a number of the reasons that you've heard previously, but specifically, as Mr. Gallerano said, the RSIS considers local characteristics. And we've heard discussions regarding the mass transit available, the availability of busing, the availability of the train in Maplewood, all within a reasonable distance from the site, which speaks to the fact that people who may live in this apartment complex may not use a vehicle to commute. They may use buses. They may use trains. I know there's been a lot of discussion of who's this going to be marketed to. Well, it wouldn't be marketed to me right now. I have a wife and 2 children, and eventually my daughter hopefully will be driving, and I wouldn't live in this place. But when I graduated from college, yeah, this would have been very attractive to me to live on in a relatively busy area that has some, shopping, retail opportunities, and mass transit, where if I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, I was a bachelor and I had 1 car. But it's also important to note that the Institute of Transportation Engineers also, in their 5th edition of the Parking Generation Manual, has parking statistics for the low-rise residential housing as well. And they say that a parking demand of 12 spaces would be appropriate for this a site of 9 apartments. So it's in tune with what's proposed at this site. And as you heard also, 1 space will be provided for each apartment, leaving 3 spaces for visitors, Amazon drop-offs, etc. But again, there's also the ability to have 5 additional spaces at 2030 Milburn Avenue, which will allow for 5 spaces, bringing the total to 17, which actually matches the RSIS requirement. And like I said, like Mr. Gallerano said, we're not using the 5 spaces necessarily to avoid the variance. What we're doing is demonstrating that sufficient parking can be provided for the residents and the visitors to this facility. And what stresses that even more is that within the RSIS calculations, 1/2 parking space per unit must be set aside or is required for visitors. When you have 9 units, 1/2 of that is about 5 spaces, leaving out of the 17 that are required, 12 specifically for residents. The site provides 12 parking spaces. So this site, based on residential site improvement standards, provides sufficient parking for the residents of this building. What it does not match with RSIS is for visitors. And that is why 5 spaces are being provided across the street on Springfield Avenue. So overall, for these reasons, it is my opinion that the site, based on the marketing, the potential tenants who will look to find this building attractive, the residential site improvement standards, and as well as ITE data, that sufficient parking will be provided for the property.
Mr. Gallerano testified with respect to the width of the driveway stalls, and in your report you referenced that the ITE requires 18. Can you just touch on that regarding the size of the parking stalls and that we believe whether or not that's accurate?
Yeah, the parking stalls are going to be 9 feet wide by 18 feet deep, which is an RSIS standard as well as a recommendation by the Institute of Transportation Engineers, and is generally a typical engineering standard in almost, I don't want to say all, but a substantial amount of the projects that I've worked on. 9 feet by 18 deep is a parking standard. Typically, where you have a higher turnover of parking, perhaps in a shopping area like a Wawa or a Walmart, you might want a wider or deeper stall just because there's a lot of in and out of traffic. But in a residential complex where people have an assigned space and they park in the same lot every day and are aware of the stall dimensions, that is more than appropriate, and it allows for a reduction in impervious coverage for the site as well.
And in your professional opinion, do you believe the granting of the variances will have any significant impact on the surrounding area?
I think as long as the facility is maintained appropriately, with monitoring of usage of parking via security cameras and within leases or within leasing meetings, it's determined that sufficient parking in a specific area of the lot across the street is available for visitors. Yes, I think it'll be not a detriment, as there'll be sufficient space for residents and visitors.
And do you think the proximity to crossing the street, do you believe that's, in your professional opinion, unreasonable or?
No, it's a little bit of a circuitous route because you can't directly cross Springfield Avenue in front of the site, but there is the signal at Milburn Avenue, which has crosswalks and pedestrian signals. That's about a 650-foot walk from the site to the parking lot. And if you want to live here and you have a second vehicle, which I do not think is going to be very prevalent, you will have to opt on whether or not that walk is worth it for you.
No further questions at this time.
Are there any board members that would like to question the testimony that Mr. Polinack has given?
I have
Yes,
a question.
Yes, Mr. Wiley.
You said that there were 5 spaces across the street?
Yes.
Now, are those spaces designated just for the residents or the tenants of this building?
I don't know specifically how they are handled, but there's an abundance of parking spaces at the office directly across, and I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, but I believe there's a potential lease that may be a 99-year lease.
I can answer that because our firm has been negotiating with the adjacent property owners. So the agreement or the understanding that we've had with the property owners provide 5 spaces and up to an additional 5 if needed. And the proposal will be a 99-year lease that will run. I know one of the comments from the board attorney was whether or not, in the event of a sale, whether or not these spaces will still be available, and the negotiation, and I spoke to them again today just to make sure that we were still on the same page, will be a 99-year proposed lease.
So with the spaces, they're only allowed for the residents? Or how do you monitor that to know that that particular car comes from that resident?
So again, within the lease, and we're working out the minutia of it, obviously any residents would have to, the potential would be, if the residents are using it, would be to register those vehicles. There's obviously will be no parking signs. We would have to identify which cars could park there, potentially. We do have to identify that, but the intent is to make sure, if it's going to be the residents, that those cars are registered. We provide the names of those parking to the management, because I know they do have a property manager, and we have been dealing with primarily the property manager that manages that parking space, because they have 99 spaces.
So that the parking spaces, those 5 parking spaces, anybody that lives in the building can park there?
In that building?
Yeah.
They have 99 spaces. I don't know what the requirement are for those buildings, but I know there's a surplus. As Ms. Kopp testified, and we also reviewed, we pulled the resolution. This property's in the Maplewood. We pulled the resolution of the approval, and there was surplus of parking. Whether or not who else could park there, but our lease will specify that we are guaranteed those 5 spaces. The owner would have to negotiate where those 5 spaces would be, and the possibility of an additional 5 spaces, up to 10 maximum, if needed.
But how do you know, how would you determine who can park there?
How do you determine,
Right. If
determine from our building?
Which five vehicles can park in those spaces?
Well, this would be the surplus. This would be the surplus. That I would have to bring the owner as far as the operation is concerned, but we were just providing the, so again, I think the testimony is that our parking will provide sufficient on-site for our residents because it will be assigned. This would be in the case if anyone needs, that's assigned to our, or affiliated with our building will need to park there, we'll permit them to park there.
Yeah, that was my question, because you said that they were going to be registered, but you also stated that visitors.
And so that would have to be worked out in the minutia of how we control that, and again, that's,
I may
yes.
park there but not be a visitor.
And again, that's a good question as far as the operation of where who could park there and how they control that management of that. That's something that we would have to provide as condition of approval with the management. It's the availability of the parking, but as far as how they control that, I'm sure they would have something in place as well, and we would have to work out the final details of that.
Haven't worked that out yet.
No, we worked out that it's available. I think that was the details of the lease, and again, that was one of the conditions that we would provide a memorandum of understanding and that it would run with the land. So we're not proposing that these spaces would be lost upon the transfer of title, that this would run with the land, and that's where the 99-year lease would come into effect.
Yeah, but that's not what I was saying.
No, I understand your question. You're asking as far as the bidders, and maybe, again, maybe operation-wise, I can bring up the owner, see if he can explain how that would work. I can represent that we haven't worked, I have not personally worked out with the owner of the property. We just know that they're providing those spaces, and so the management and the owner would have to work out the final details to make sure that the residents of that building or the visitors that are affiliated with the proposed 9-unit could park in those 5 spaces, so.
Well, I think part of the confusion, this is Rob Pansul, the board attorney. We did have discussions with your colleague at the last session, and I had a concern. I understand what the lease might say, but if the use of that property changes, it might be a breach of a lease situation. And we don't, the problem, I think, and Mr. Wiley's hitting on it, that lease is not before this board. We have no idea if that lease does exist, if it's going to exist, if it's a condition. We still don't know the particulars to be able to deliberate on the parking variance that's at issue here. And I think that's part of the confusion Mr. Wiley has in terms of how it's going to logistically occur. Because last time we had a lot of discussion about if a spot's available on Montclair Ave, that's where they're going. They ain't walking across the street to go park on, in a lot across Springfield Avenue. That's a practical matter. I think we even discussed it rhetorically. I mean, that's just common sense. And that's the problem, I think. That's the void, I think, that Mr. Wiley is hitting on.
So I believe, and again, I did review, I did speak with my colleague, and I did review the prior meeting to make sure that I understood, as if I was here, what occurred. I believe the stipulation was that we would make that a condition of approval with the review of the lease or the memorandum of his understanding in that resolution and approval. I know I've done a lot of approvals where I'm reviewing it along with council, so that language stating that it's foolproof, that we're just not making this up. And I believe we also stipulated on the record, testimony came forth, that we understand that if we don't have those parking spaces, then we would have to come back, because then we don't have those variances. So that's what we would consider to be the condition of approval, and it can provide the requisite deed and language setting forth how that would be operated, and the applicant will be willing to do that as a condition of approval. And if we don't meet that condition, then the applicant knows he has a problem, and we'd have to come back before this board or modify our application.
That is an accurate summary of the discussion I had with your colleague, but the concern that I raised, and I'm not sure has been answered, is what if something happens to that property beyond the scope of your lease. By that, and I've seen it happen, perhaps, I believe the property's in the town of Maplewood, maybe they declare to need a redevelopment and do what they want with the property, and they're not going to honor your lease at that point. And you're going to be in a situation where the building's now built with a deficiency of parking, and they lost the ability to park across the street. I mean, that was the concern I raised. I think it's something the board I think that leads to Mr. Wiley's questions, quite frankly, because I don't think he sees it as a viable alternative to the shortage in parking.
Well, I can say that there are situations where people do lease spaces for approvals, so.
No, I understand that.
Okay,
And-
off-site, not
if
necessarily
it's a site
on-site.
plan and it's a conforming use, you try to work in conjunction. The problem here is it sits before this board as a zoning board in a D1 use variance context. They're trying to weigh these variables before they can grant such extreme relief. I think that's why the question was relevant. The what-if there can have a tremendous impact to the neighborhood. You're looking to get spaces because you know there's a shortage. If you lose the opportunity to have those spaces available, then what after the building's built? That's the question. Right.
Well, I guess I know, because I'm also a transactional attorney, what we would usually recommend in that negotiation, again, we understand if we don't have those spaces before we would have to come back, is that 99-year lease gets recorded with the land. You know,
Right.
I'm not saying we're trying to litigate, nobody
No, I
wants to
know.
litigate, but an agreement is an agreement. And so you have a property owner that's willing to sign a 99-year lease that will be recorded on title, and then
I
that run with
understand.
the land. I think that provides you some
If
benefit.
it was this property, I would think it would have more legal credence. The problem is you're dealing with a property in another town by another owner across the street, of which this board certainly doesn't have any control over what happens. This town doesn't have any control over what happens there. And this board doesn't even have those particulars yet. It still is a work in progress.
If I can just, so one of the conditions, again, that we understand that the first step is to come to this township, is that we also have to go to Maplewood. And so there's provisions or protections in place that it also has to be sufficient to Maplewood. It's all circular, we have to get approval from Maplewood. Maplewood has to agree to that lease. So I think there are protections in place. Again, a written agreement that we provided to this board for your attorney to review for the language. And if there are issues that this board or Mr. Pansella, as a condition of approval, the applicant understands that they would have to come back. So we've crafted this agreement, and again, I understand the concept that we can't come before the board and say, oh, we have a 5-year lease for 5 spaces. I've seen developers try to do it and say, that's not going to fly. 99-year lease, written, that a recorded lease that runs with the land, and that's also subject to the approval of the adjacent property, the adjacent municipality. I believe those are protections that this board can weigh. And again, if there are issues that the developer has to take, their risk, that someone doesn't want to adhere to his lease, he understands that he has to come back.
Well, I will note it as a condition for you to deliberate that that's what they're proposing. You don't have the lease before you. It's not a part of this record. And you have the ability to deliberate on your concerns about the viability of that lease on a property across the street, across Springfield Avenue, filling the void of deficiency for the parking variance in and of itself in conjunction with the D1 use variance that you're considering. So that's the condition. So I noted it for the record.
I have a question.
You get to deliberate, though. You don't, I mean, it's not something that you are forced to accept. You get to ask questions and deliberate on it.
Mr. Manguso, did you have a question?
No, that was in conjunction with Mr. Pansula.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes, you stated that in the parking area where the permitted spaces are going to be, there's going to be security cameras?
Yes, that was the prior
Will anybody
testimony.
be monitoring those security cameras?
I don't know the specific operations of how frequently they will be monitored, but if they are there and available, I would assume management would look to see which vehicles are in their lot.
So yes, in speaking with they would be managed, and also, I'm sure, as a condition of approval, I'm sure the applicant would be willing to provide the IP to the police station, so they can also monitor. I know that's something
Well, I
that
mean,
usually police stations usually
It's all
ask
well
for.
and good to have cameras, but if nobody's watching what's
Oh
going
no,
on, it's
they
not
will
gonna
be
prevent anything.
they will be monitored.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Polnick, you were here for the testimony of Mr. Gallerano. Obviously, I just want to be clear for the record. You heard the testimony and the comments
Yes, just from before.
earlier from this morning. You
Yeah,
were here-
absolutely.
Or this evening.
Ms. Scott, you had a question?
Yes, I think I have two. One
Okay.
is the lot that we're referencing that has the 99-year lease, is it currently leased by anyone else?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And then the second question goes back to the security. I know we have the security cameras that's going to be focused on the actual building, but will the security also be focused on the lot? Because if you're talking about a parking lot that has about 100 spaces, did I hear that?
The adjacent property?
Right, the one, how many spaces is it? Is it 100 spaces?
The adjacent property to my knowledge has 99 spaces.
Okay, 99 spaces.
Well, it's
That's
not
how-
adjacent, it's across the street.
Across the street,
Across the
with
street,
the
okay.
one in Maplewood, yes.
That particular property. So I get it that the cameras will be monitoring the cars that are on the actual property, but if you have another lot that has the potential to have 99 vehicles, they could be spread all over the place. So will that security camera also be monitoring that parking lot that's across the street from the actual property?
That I would have to speak to the client to find out. I don't know if we can put cameras on we don't own the property, so that would be, we would have to find out whether or not, I'm sure there'll be, let's not assume, but presumably there's cameras on the adjacent property with 99 parking spaces.
Okay, because, I mean, if you park where you live, there's a sense of security. But
Okay.
if you park your car across the street,
Right.
the elements, anything is possible, it could happen. So
And
that's why I
again,
was-
the intent is for people who reside, as the testimony provided, the residents who reside at our site will have one parking space that they will park there.
Right.
And due to the marketing, that the one space would be sufficient, and then the other one would be an overflow.
Right. But the overflow will still be people that reside in the building.
Or it might just be visitors.
Or
With the
visitors.
intent, it could just be if someone, again, these are one bedrooms. We're not proposing 3 bedrooms where you
Right.
have families and multiple. These are, as indicated, the situation where I was, in undergrad or when I went to Rutgers, if I want an apartment, I could just get a 1-bedroom.
Right.
Or similar if you're in grad school, a single professional or anyone starting out wants a 1-bedroom.
Now-
One space would be adequate. It would be for when I
Right,
when I was
I
there.
understand that, but I'm just saying, if, even as a single person, right, if I decide to have company and my company parks across the street, the last thing I would want is my company's car to have anything happen to it, because then I'm not gonna have that company again. So,
And again, I'm sure in speaking with the property owner for the property they'll call it the U-Haul building, it's not an office space.
Okay.
Again, there's mechanism. I'm sure he doesn't want to have to report vandalism or anything on the property.
Right.
So again, we can provide, if the board's willing to provide, what security measures. That building went before the planning board, so I'm sure that Maplewood Planning Board had requirements for security, the exterior of the property. So we can certainly provide that as condition of approval to show that there's ample lighting and everything else, because this is a project that went before the Maplewood Planning Board.
thank you.
Ms. Alexander?
Hi, yes. Mr. Polyanek, is that how I say your name?
It's close enough.
Okay, so we've been listening to the testimonies all night, and maybe I just got confused. So did the parking spaces go from 12 parking spaces to 22? We now have 22 parking spaces? Is that what
No.
we're saying?
No,
You
they're-
have 5 to 10 that you
Oh.
can get a 99-year lease.
We have.
How many parking spaces do we have?
I can clarify that.
Yeah.
So the lease as proposed is 5 spaces, and if we need more, we have up to the ability, an additional 5 to a maximum of 10.
Is it possible to get those 10 straight up from the beginning? Like, if you're going to bring in a 99-year lease, it seems like it would need to come in with the 10.
I'm sorry, just 1 second. Again, we have that in our lease, so the applicant will be willing to state that we'll pay for the 10 and put that in the lease, the 99-year lease.
All right, thank you.
Any other board questions?
I just have a question, yeah. Is this lease, are they going to pay for these spots? Okay, just out of curiosity, because
That's being
what happens if they
borne by-
don't agree upon the number?
No, nobody does anything for free. No, it is, we are paying for those spaces that the developer is willing to bear the cost, yes.
Because this has been in front of this board once before, and it didn't work out because the numbers was too high. So just keep that in mind.
We've agreed on we have a number. Trust me,
Mr. Wiley?
Yeah, this parking lot, is this for residents, or is it just a parking lot? Just, do they rent out spaces? What's there?
It's for an office building. I don't know if I could, I'm not allowed to show an aerial photo, can I, as an exhibit to the board? I don't know if that's something I could provide at this moment, just for better clarity.
I think there's an aerial photo in the record already, if I'm not mistaken.
Just so you can see where it is.
Mr. Cueto presented an aerial at the last meeting.
A7, yeah.
So the red is the site, but the spaces that we're speaking to in excess of the 12 provided are not fully on this map, but it's this parking lot here, if you could see the cursor, and it's associated with the office here. And access to this is on a back road back up in here. I believe it's Murray. Yeah, Murray Place, sorry.
What type of office, I mean, what kind of business is it?
I don't know specifically what type of business they're running in there, but the times I've been out there on a couple occasions, there's no one parked there. I've seen a maximum of possibly 5 to 10 vehicles in that lot.
You heard the testimony, Mr. Gallerano, right? And I don't want to reinvent the wheel. We heard a lot of comments. Are you familiar with Springfield Avenue and the volume of traffic that exists on that roadway?
I mean, I can't list the quantity, but yeah, I'm familiar with the characteristics of
Okay,
Springfield.
and I'm not going to get into whether you're in this area type of testimony, because that was from the public, but you understand the concerns and the view that they have living and being familiar with this neighborhood, the feeling that the crossing of Springfield Avenue is unrealistic? Do you have an opinion on that?
What is provided along Springfield Avenue, it's DOT roadway to the west of Milburn, is a high visibility crosswalk. That's that ladder type crosswalk with pedestrian heads and a pedestrian crossing at a signal, which stops traffic for a safe condition. Do I advise crossing Springfield Avenue anywhere else besides that crosswalk? No, I would not cross Springfield Avenue outside of that crosswalk.
Have you ever seen that crosswalk in operation at peak times?
Yes, yeah.
You have witnessed that?
Yeah, I have. I saw someone crossing there this afternoon, yes.
And you recognize, because I don't want to have the rehashing of all the testimony, certainly everyone has the right to cross-examine you, but the possibility that more vehicles are living at these units than you anticipate, or the ITE trip data suggests might be the case, that those people would ultimately look to park on the street on Montclair Avenue in the areas in Union Township?
I cannot state that someone will not park on Montclair Avenue if a parking space is available.
Right. That's the only point I'm making. I don't want to rehash everything Mr. Gallerano went
There's
through.
no way to police that.
Okay.
Me personally, I mean, if I was told by a friend they live in this apartment complex, park in this lot, I personally would park in the lot because I was told to do so. I would hope a lot of people would follow what their friends say. You know how it is. I mean, if someone drives by and a spot's open right in front of the building, they're taking it. It's just a matter of, what's available. But I think the provision of having automatically free parking space across the street, for me, just the way I am, I think is a great amenity for me as a visitor, that I know when I get into this area, I have a spot automatically. Once I drive down Montclair and I can't find a spot, I'm going back to that parking lot anyway. I don't like circling through roadways looking for parking. If I know there's a designated spot for me and my friends, I'm going there.
Last question from me, I think, is do you realize this is a two-family zone as it sits in Union Township where the parking lot and the driveway exist, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other board members with questions? Hearing none, at this time, are there any members of the public that would like to come forward and question just the testimony he has given?
My name is Olivia Colson. I live at 269 Hilton Avenue, Vauxhall, New Jersey, 07083. Can you tell me exactly where the building sits? Is it the one on Springfield Avenue, or is there another building behind that building with parking spaces? Because you said there were 99 parking spaces? No. No. I parked in there the other day. I got out and I mailed the letter where the mailbox is standing. Now, if that parking lot, if the building holds 99 spaces, I'd like for her to show me.
You didn't do any parking counts, right, for the actual spaces across the
I
street?
do not know the
Okay,
quantity
so
in that lot.
that's unclear in the record as to this witness.
If I can just make as an attorney that we pulled, I believe the testimony also that we actually reviewed the resolution from the municipality of Mayfield. We did an Oprah request, and there were 99 parking spaces in that resolution. I'm putting that on the record. Before I came here to state 99 spaces, I did an Oprah request, and I believe Ms. Kopp also stated that we pulled that resolution, and there are 99 spaces at that parking lot.
Ms. Moore, what's the address of this property that has 99 spaces?
I believe it's 2030 Milburn.
I just want to make sure in the record. 2030-48 Milburn Avenue in Maplewood, and it's identified as Lot 377, Block 21.07.
Could you repeat that address for the public?
2030-48 Milburn Avenue in Maplewood, New Jersey, Lot 377, Block 21.07. And just as far as stating the record, our memorandum of understanding also references the 99 parking spaces in our whereas clause, so we were aware of that.
I will check out those 99 spaces tomorrow.
I just did a quick count off an aerial, really fast.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm getting easily 70 to 80. I don't know whether it's 99, I can't confirm.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman, I think where we just need a better understanding of the location. I know you were kind enough to give us the address, but there are multiple lots in the area we think of reference.
I'm familiar with that area. You're
Is it the
right.
one, so if you're at the gateway, you know where the gateway is, so the little park, is it that parking lot? Or is it the one where you got to go off a street and around the corner, and then I'm behind the gas station?
Behind the gas station.
So that is not the lot. So, thank you.
You're welcome.
So, because there was a different understanding from the public about what lot you're talking about. So actually, you have to walk across Springfield Avenue, right, across Milburn Avenue,
Correct.
up past that one that is not the lot, turn the corner,
You got to stay with the microphone.
and now I'm in the parking lot that has the 99 spot. So I think someone mentioned 650 feet, and maybe it is. I think it's a little further than that, but we just needed some clarification on the lot. So,
Thank you.
You good?
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Excuse me.
Excuse me, if you could just clarify, what type of business is on this lot? A U-Haul?
It's an office building. I believe there's also a U-Haul rental in there, but all of the offices, I cannot make that representation.
So there's multiple offices in that building?
I believe so. I can't make that representation.
Do you know if there's U-Hauls that are parked in the lot as well?
There may be, but it's an underutilized parking lot with spaces that are not being used, and it's office space that's used in the day, so.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Janet Patterson, 168 Waldorf Place, Vauxhall, New Jersey. My first question is, and maybe I didn't pick it up from the first speaker, the driveway for this building is on Montclair Avenue?
Yes.
Okay. So, and you said that you did a traffic study.
Yes.
What time of day was your traffic study?
We did not perform traffic counts at the location. What we did is we looked at traffic projections for the times in which the building will be at its busiest.
Mm-hmm.
And those are generally the morning commuter period, the evening commuter period, and the Saturday midday when people may be out shopping.
Okay, so the residents coming out of this driveway on Montclair Avenue,
Yes.
they're either going to turn left to try to go out to Springfield Avenue, and it's
That-
very difficult now.
It would be a left from
It
Montclair
would be a
onto
left
Springfield.
from Montclair.
Well, no, a right turn onto Montclair.
Okay, if you're on Montclair Avenue, I'm thinking to go to Springfield Avenue, which way do they turn?
You would make a right out of the driveway to Springfield Avenue.
Okay. To try to get across Springfield Avenue from Montclair Avenue is very difficult. Very difficult. So, did you think about vehicle safety? Did you think about pedestrian safety trying to cross that street?
Yes, I mean, it is currently a permitted movement at that intersection, and the volume of traffic that will be added to that approach is going to be essentially insignificant. You're going to have about 5 vehicles maximum
But you said added to what's already difficult
Correct.
to get across.
Correct.
Added
Well, we're not
to.
adding any vehicles to the through movements on Springfield. We're just adding movements to people trying to get out of Montclair onto Springfield.
Okay, they're not going to get across Springfield Avenue. They're going to turn and go down and try to go through Russell Street. That's what's going to happen. That traffic is going to go the other way, making Russell Street more congested. The other thing, how wide is that driveway?
I believe it's 24 feet. I would ask Mr. Gallerano to confirm, 24-foot driveway?
Okay, so it's wide enough for emergency
Two-
vehicles, so 2 cars can get.
Two-way traffic, correct.
To get in and out. Okay. Thank you, that's all I have.
Mr. Polinak, maybe I'm missing something, but how do you do a traffic projection without doing a traffic count?
Well, what we did is we didn't assess existing traffic volumes by doing peak period traffic counts. What I did is I looked at the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual for a 9-unit apartment building, and based on data associated with the resources that they have, there's trip rates or fitted curve equations for the data that's been collected, and a projection that a 9-unit apartment building would say in the morning peak hour you would anticipate more people leaving, 1 vehicle entering and 3 vehicles exiting during a peak hour.
Thank you. Are there any? Mr. Rosser?
I want to just clarify something in terms of that. The building across the street, there's a medical building. There's a parking lot in the front as you come down Milburn Avenue at the first block. You can park in the front of the medical building. That does not have 99 spaces. You can also come out the back side of that same medical building. That has probably the 99 parking spaces. The question then becomes, that back parking lot is on the back side of the gas station.
Correct.
Right? Which means you either have to walk around the building or try to go through the gas station. Right? Because that's the only place there could be 99 parking spaces.
No, you're correct. That is the lot.
Okay? So, right, so that's the lot. So
Yes.
you've got to you either got to walk around the street or come through the gas station, because there's a gas station in front of that lot.
Correct.
Right? And the other question I had, are there any, because you mentioned that you have a number of, in your credentials, you indicated how many things. How many of those sites that you visited or have been involved with have anything that has a highway, a state highway that people have to cross to to get up the amount of parking spaces they need for the variance?
I could say that there's not many, if at all, where parking was used on the other side specifically for a use, but certainly I've worked on innumerable properties on busy state highways that are either residential or retail, where there's a, anticipation of a community of crossing
Right.
to shop.
But that's a whole community. Here we're talking about one site for a use variance that people have to cross the street to meet the requirements for 5 additional parking spaces, right? And that 5 spaces to meet the requirements for, I guess, 16? I think that's what it is.
Yes, correct.
Right. So the thing there is that they still have to cross, a highway to do it. That's different than what you just described.
You're correct. I haven't done one where reserved parking is across from a state highway. But, I mean, it's not uncommon to parking decks in certain municipalities where, you have to cross in order to get to a restaurant or, other retail features.
Like I said, none of those that you're talking about are the requirements that we're looking at for this particular site for the use variance.
You're correct.
Okay.
Are there,
I only have one question. That lot that we're discussing is no bigger than this side over here. The park on Springfield Avenue is no longer than 10 feet. Montclair Avenue, that's another story. The other part is Laurel Avenue. There can't be any parking on any of those streets. And how are they going to build? Is the parking going to be underneath the apartments and the parking, and then the 2 buildings up?
Yes, you will enter the driveway into the parking field, and there will be structure above that parking.
So it'll be 2 stories above.
2 above the parking. So you have ground floor.
So you're going to get all of that in this little bit of space.
Oh, for the subject property?
You're going to get that building in this little space from here to here. That's all that space is. I've been living here 70 years. That's all that space is. I can't see you putting the building here. That's all I see.
If I can just clarify that question, the proposed building is in Maplewood. Again, we understand that we are seeking a D1 variance, but it's really the parking lot and the driveway and detention. The building itself will be on the lots that are in Maplewood that if this board grants the approval, we would have to go to Maplewood to also get the approvals. So it's not just the lots that we're referencing in Vauxhall or Union. It's also because, again, I've indicated that this property lies in 2 municipalities, and that building itself will be on another lot, 2 lots.
I believe the board members are aware of that.
Okay.
Mr. Williams?
Like this picture here. I gotta talk loud because I gotta go and point out the different places you're at.
Does the mic travel, or?
Oh, shoot, drop the mic.
Maybe not.
You hear me? All right. Oh, shoot, watch out. Now. All right, I'm looking at the diagram here, and this is Montclair Avenue here.
Correct.
Correct. So you're saying the parking is going to be where?
I'm gonna do the path of a.
The red is that in the front?
The red is here's Springfield Avenue.
Correct.
That's the front of the property.
Okay.
If you were to walk west along Springfield Avenue,
Yeah.
you walk north across Springfield Avenue.
No, I'm not talking about, I'm not asking that question. I'm just asking about the parking
Oh.
for the Weston is going to be on Montclair Avenue.
Yes, right in here will be the parking underneath the building.
Okay, my question to you is that there's no parking, like I said earlier, on this side of Montclair Avenue.
On the east side, right?
There's no parking.
Correct.
The sign says no parking.
Not allowed.
Okay, good. The stop sign by state law has to be 50 feet back.
Parking has to be 50 feet back.
No, the stop from the stop sign. The stop sign from the stopping sign back is 50 feet, but you can't park on that side. So You're suggesting to come down Montclair Avenue and turning into the back into there?
Into this property, onto this lot. In this vicinity, there'll be parking spaces on a paved parking lot.
Okay, just like my neighbor just mentioned, he's been there for 70 years. I've been there for 28 years. There's no way, because back there before, because he knows a two-zone housing, they said, there'd be a tile store there, a small little tile store that covered that whole building. That tile store had no parking on it at all. There's a little history of Vauxhall. So my question again, because Springfield Avenue is there, you're talking about the building for parking is across the street. So basically, when you go down by Joe's Pizza, over in the corner there, you got to cross there and then go where they put the new corner. In the corner, there used to be a car wash there. It's no longer there because a car came and smashed into it and a child got killed. Just give you some information about how busy that street is. They tore that building down and made it into like a little sitting area, okay? That Springfield Avenue going down Milburn Avenue, cars go pretty fast, and there's a light there. The light there is always going to make a right-hand turn. Going straight is a stoplight, but then it turns on green to go. When you come up Milburn Avenue, there's two lanes. One lane going up Springfield Avenue, the other lane is supposed to go either Montclair Avenue or go down Laurel Avenue. So when you did your estimation of traffic, you said during the afternoon?
We project traffic associated with the proposed building during a morning hour, a evening hour, and a Saturday hour.
Okay, what times the evening hours are you saying?
Those are generally, one specific hour is the peak between 4 o'clock in the evening and 6:30 in the evening.
Between 4 and 6:30?
We generally find the busiest hour of roadways during those timeframes, yes.
Okay. Do you know that roadway between that hour is rush hour coming off of 78?
Yes.
You know that?
Yes.
Okay, so it's more congested there.
Absolutely. That's why,
So-
that's why we look at those timeframes, because they're the busiest.
And what happens is, being you don't live in the area, what they do, they come down my street, Russell Street. And then when they don't come down Russell Street, you go down Hilton Avenue, where on Hilton Avenue, there's a school. Now, I know it's after 3 o'clock the kids are out, but basically, there really is that pattern that you're saying for you can walk down here and walk down there. It's not safe. It's not safe at all. The garbage thing earlier, you're saying, where's the garbage going to be at now? Is it going to be on Montclair side, Laurel Avenue side, or what side is it going to be on, the garbage?
The pickup will be Montclair, because that's where the driveway is. If I can, let's see if I can click.
No, I see Montclair Avenue. So the red is that you're talking about?
The red is the property.
Property line.
Yep. And see that blue line?
Yeah, I see a blue line.
That's the difference between municipalities.
So on the corner there, that's considered as Maplewood?
Yes.
So the little spot here is Vauxhall?
Correct. The building is in Maplewood, or will be in Maplewood, or is proposed to be in Maplewood.
It's supposed to be in Maplewood?
Proposed to be in Maplewood, correct. Let's see if I can, is that doing it? Yeah, here we go. So there's like it basically blown up. And here's our Springfield Avenue again.
Okay.
And here's our Montclair, and as you
Okay.
head north up Montclair, this is
Okay.
where there's no parking along this side of the roadway.
There's no parking down the whole street. There's no parking down along the
Well,
whole street.
no parking allowed on this side of the street.
Yeah, from
This side of
Russell
the street's
Street
where there's
down.
none available.
Say what again?
This side of the street has very little available.
Well, there's parking along that street there.
Just, it's very busy and taken on that side.
Yeah, it's taken by the residents on both sides of the street.
Correct. And this is the driveway that accesses the parking lot that's in Vauxhall, and this is the building that's in Maplewood. And to the west over here is, like up in here, is Milburn Avenue. And the gas station's over here.
I appreciate I live there. I know.
I just
No
wanted to
disrespect.
orient you on the map.
No disrespect. But that driveway you're talking about is only 18 feet wide in Vauxhall. So how are you going to have a car go down there, then park into the parking space?
It's like a typical driveway. You turn in, and then you enter a parking field.
You turn, okay, Montclair Avenue, you turn in,
Yes, exactly.
and you park here.
Correct.
Okay, so who says that if you park in First, you can't park down there? Because you come in there with the car you have,
Yep.
with a setback. Now, say in the morning time, somebody got to leave. See, somebody gets in the car and they pull the car out. They can't go because she can't come out, because you have a lane this wide, all these spaces here, 12 spaces, but cars parking that way.
No, but the lanes and the spaces have been designed with sufficient depth where a vehicle can pull out and maneuver and get out of the site.
So you have a SUV or a compact car can go here.
In an 18-foot stall.
And back out.
Correct, through in a 24-foot aisle.
So
Two-way aisle.
if I leave in the morning time at 7 o'clock, or wife leave at 7:15, oh, she only gets one space because I'm parked underneath the parking spot. She's going to across the street.
She may have to, yes.
No, she will not. No, she will not. If you are married and you say that you, when you're single, no disrespect.
No,
I'm saying.
My wife's not parking there either, but I'm not
You're
living
right.
here.
You're right.
We would never live here.
Yeah. See, the thing about it is, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. The parking spaces that you're referring to are for certain tenants. Those who can't park there have to park across the way. But all those things you're saying, did you ever mention about handicap? Or is that not tended for the different, by the marketing, targeting? Is any handicap spots going to be in there?
There is an ADA spot on the
One?
property. One, Tony? One. Yeah, one spot, which meets the requirement.
So, no disrespect, my father was 90 years old. If I lived there, I was single, my father came to visit me, he'll park there. Say my neighbor here, grandmother comes and visits me, oh, Mr. Williams, my grandmother's coming over. Was she gonna park across the street and walk, or if I had to park across the street, walk my 90-year-old father across Springfield Avenue? Or anybody here who has a parent that is still living over the age of 80-something to walk across the street over because they're coming to visit you, come and visit their grandson or what have you?
I mean, honestly, these are the options of residents that they have to make that choice. My mother's 80. She doesn't walk well. She does drive. If she's coming
my father's
over,
90, she still drives.
if she comes over, she can use my space. I could pick her up in the lot.
But
I mean, there's just ways of handling certain situations.
But I thought earlier you said that the spots are actually ordained to the people who live there. So how
Yeah,
can you,
so I mean, there's methods of
getting around.
No, there's methods of operating a parking facility for
What I'm
residential.
saying is that if you have a parking space that's assigned to you,
Yeah.
your friend will park across the street, but your mama drives, so she'll park in your space, correct?
She may, if you could work.
But she's not
something out.
allowed to, because you said earlier it's supposed to be for that resident.
You're right. You're right, that one specific vehicle, but there could be an instance where perhaps residents have a sticker or a hang tag, and I could give my mom that tag for that visit. Or I could pick her up in the other lot and save her the walk.
You're saying a lot of ifs, no disrespect. You're saying a lot of ifs. You're doing a lot of changes, like assumptions. The thing about it, if the person who's going to buy this building or rent this building has a spot there, and everybody was saying, they're going to park on Montclair Avenue. They're going to go across the street. If anybody comes visit, if you're a single person, if you have a two-bedroom, and somebody comes visit, if your mom comes visit you, yeah, you're going to go out your vehicle, drive across the street, pick her up, correct? So when you come back, say somebody takes your spot.
Well, they can't take my spot because I'm assigned one spot.
There you go. You are assigned one spot. So your mother can't take your spot.
I could switch places with
You
her.
can't switch places. You can't switch places. You see what I'm saying? No, I'm not trying to be funny, but...
No, it's all a matter of operations.
No, it's not operation. It's truth. That's what we're talking about. You saying that you're not going to park on Montclair Avenue, you just stated. And it's on the record that if you are there and your mom comes and visits you, but you don't live there, but if you did live there and your mom visits you, you will get up and move your vehicle for her to park there. You can't do that because in the tenant write-up, it states in there, nobody can take your spot.
If it is specifically written in that manner,
said it.
in that
At
manner.
least you'll write it in.
All right, then I'll pick my
All right.
mom up from the parking lot.
Is it
That's
safe?
just what
to-
I'll do.
is
Mom,
it-
sorry, you can't park in the space.
Just
I
to
gotta
follow
come
up
get
on
you.
his
Give me a call.
question, is it safe to assume that of the 12 spaces that are on site, the 9 allocated spaces for the unit owners are going to be other than the EV and the handicap space, correct?
I like you.
The 9 spaces will be regular spaces allocated to the unit owners, correct?
That is my
So
understanding.
amongst the 3 remaining spaces for general overflow, 1 is handicapped and 1 is EV, correct? Of those 3. So there's really 1.
I mean, it matters who you lease to. If you-
I know that.
If there's someone who needs a handicap space.
I know that, and we've spared you the cross-examination that Mr. Gallerano unfortunately had to go through. That's in the record. And that's what I think the question of Mr. Williams is getting to. If the 9 spaces are allocated, the regular, I'll call them regular spaces, because the other spaces.
Well, they don't necessarily have to be the regular spaces that are allocated.
Well, they don't, but that's, in theory, if they're not, then they lose one of the other spaces. If that handicapped mother comes, she's not parking in that extra space, she's going to have to park elsewhere. If you allocate the handicap spot to a unit owner and you get a handicapped visitor,
But you
they're
can-
out of luck. Are you familiar with the New Jersey law on electric vehicle charging?
Yes.
Is it your understanding that the space can only be used while the vehicle is charging, or do you think it's different?
You know, I think the legislation is a little vague on that.
I agree. What do you think it is?
I've heard.
I
many-
believe that you have to be charging to be in the space, and then when you're done, you got to move it. That's the way it reads, anyway.
Yeah, I've heard the opposite more often through my testimony, watching others testify in board proceedings.
But would you agree that's the way it reads? It's expected that if you're using the electrical vehicle space, you're charging.
I don't know. It leans towards that way, correct. I think so, but it's not definitive in my interpretation of it. I think the legislation needs some work in its language.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to question just the testimony that Mr. Polinack has given? Hearing none, do you have another witness this morning?
I do. At this time, we would like to recall Mr. Gallerano to provide the planning testimony.
Thank you.
He's already sworn. Yeah, you can answer.
Mr. Gallerano, now that you're back up here, I have a question that I was saving. The EV station, okay, is that under the building?
Yes, under the building.
Okay. I would suggest that if this does get approved or whatever, I would like that to be relocated. They have problems with these electrical vehicles catching on fire, and they cannot put them out. And if it's under a building, we have a major problem. So I know that certain towns are asking for these things to be put in open space, and especially now when you have parking garages, they're asking for them to be put on the very top so it doesn't cause a hazard. So that is something that I will be a stickler on regardless, whatever outcome this is.
We're open to moving them. They're
Okay.
we're not married to these locations, so absolutely. We would work with you on a location. Again, we're going to be talking about planning. As you know, this property, again, I don't know, keep reiterating it, but partially in Maplewood, partially in Union. The parking lot, again, is located in the Union side. The building is in the Maplewood side. However, we are here for the D1 variance because in the RB zone, which is a two-family zone on the Union side, that does not permit multifamily, so that's triggering the D1 variance. Also have several bulk variances that are being requested, again, pertaining to the RB zone. Those include A pre-existing non-conforming lot depth, where 100 foot is required, and 75 foot is proposed. The minimum front yard requirement is 25 feet, and there's a 10-foot proposed. The maximum building height, I misspoke before, I said 35 feet, it's actually 32 foot. And the building will comply with the 32 foot. It'll be less than 32. However, the number of stories is 2, and we're proposing 3 stories. But again, the height will be within the permitted. The maximum building coverage is 40%, 46% is proposed. Maximum impervious coverage permitted is 60%, and 74.6 is proposed. So those are all of the bulk variances, and again, included in the bulk variances, the parking variances, I think we've talked about pretty extensively. Just looking at the, again, the overall requirements for the parking, again, I want to keep reiterating, but it's 16 parking spaces are required, 17 per RSIS with a 1 parking spot credit under the EV law. That leaves us with 16 spaces required, 12 spaces are being provided. 2 EV spaces are included in the 16. So just staying on the parking variance for the moment, as traffic engineer pointed out, that if we were looking at ITE, 12 spaces would be required. That would be, that would be under the ITE as opposed to RSIS. The ITE tends to, they look at this more often. They review these parking standards more often than RSIS does. RSIS, I think, started somewhere like 30 years ago. And like, as far as I know, the parking requirements really haven't changed much in 30 years. So they really don't, RSIS doesn't really look at the parking and stay with the trends, right? ITE constantly reviews the parking. They look at the trends. The last 10 years, everybody knows just the amount of apartment buildings that have been built in New Jersey, has changed the parking dynamics. And again, it really depends on location. Transit villages are looked at different than rural locations or suburban locations. Our parking ratio here with the 12 spaces is 1.33 per unit. That's a pretty good ratio when you look at being near a downtown and being close to mass transit. Again, 1 space would be assigned to a unit, 3 spaces would be assigned to or left for visitors. I know there's a question as to what happens if somebody comes to visit and they need that spot, or if the handicap spot is taken. Well, there's still additional visitor spots that are two additional visitor spots that would be open. A parking spot would be assigned to a specific unit. Now, it's not going to stop a particular tenant from allowing somebody to use that spot. I do it myself. I live in a townhouse development. I have 1 garage spot, 1 driveway spot. And if somebody's coming to visit, I take my car and move it down the street. I let the visitor use my driveway, just as a courtesy that they don't have to walk. And the same thing can be done. If a visitor's coming, just say it was an elderly person, you didn't want them to walk. As traffic engineer pointed out, you could do a couple of things. They could let them use that spot. There's nothing that stops them from letting a visitor use their spot. It's assigned to their unit, and they can move their car across the street temporarily if they wanted to. So again, that's an option, right? That's something that's managed by an individual tenant, how they want to treat their visitor. A visitor's coming, if they do have the ability to walk, you direct them to park across the street. Again, I'm the same way. If I was visiting and somebody said you need to park across the street, that's where I would park. And I think that most people would try to comply with what somebody asked them to do. They were visiting somebody and they asked them to park across the street. I think most people would comply. With respect to the overflow spots, I mean, if there's a lease across the street, the lease is wrong with the property, so I don't believe that the sale of the property is going to negate the lease, right? If an owner buys that property, he's got to honor the lease, just like any other lease. I know there's a question about what would happen if that property was redeveloped. I believe if a redevelopment plan was put in place for that property by Maplewood, you can't just kick tenants out. There has to be provisions in the redevelopment plan to reconcile tenants, right? You just can't go in and say, I'm sorry, we're going to redevelop this building and kick everybody out in the street. There has to be provisions to relocate these people, buy them out, whatever needs to be done. But you just don't, I don't believe that just wipes out all the leases or wipes out all the tenants' rights to the property. So if that was a case, the property was sold or it was going to be redeveloped, those spaces have to be reconciled. They're just not, I don't think they're just immediately wiped out. So again, we talked about I was talking about mass transit, and I said I would talk about that in a little bit more detail. So there's several bus routes that run along Springfield Avenue. Specifically, there is a bus stop right at the corner of Milburn Avenue. Again, there is access to that by way of crosswalks, by way of traffic lights. So if you look at 3 routes, you have Route 25. That actually will take you to, according to New Jersey Transit, this is directly from their website, that would take you to Irvington Business Center, Irvington Bus Terminal, downtown Newark, Penn Station, Market Street, Ironbound, and then it would also take you to the connecting path and New Jersey Light Rail to Jersey City, which would give you access to Penn Station in New York. Route 70, take you to Livingston Mall, Summit, Short Hills Mall. It would take you again to Irvington and also to the Newark destinations. Route 375, again, Irvington Business District, takes you to the downtown business district in Newark, Penn Station, Newark, Ironbound, and also takes you to the connecting path and New Jersey Rail, which could bring you to Jersey City, giving you connection points to New York City. Again, I talked a lot about the master plan. The reason why we talk about the master plan with a D1 variance, we look at the suitability of the site for the particular use. Again, a D1 variance, obviously it's not a permitted use. That's why this board exists. It's to evaluate the evidence, evaluate the proofs. And I think the master plan is important because when we look at the suitability, as I pointed out, when you look at the goals and objectives of the master plan, this site is very particularly suited for the use because it really aligns with the goals of the master plan. So looking at the master plan, I believe is very important with all D1 variances, but I think specifically when you look at the goals and objectives, again, it aligns, I believe it aligns very nicely. Again, we talked about walking distance along Springfield, to the businesses along Springfield Avenue. There are many different types of establishments, eating establishments, market, convenience stores, and, a host of other type of neighborhood services that somebody would want to walk to. It's also within 1.1 miles of the Maplewood train station and 1.6 miles to the Milburn station. So although it's not exactly around the corner, it's not of a significant distance where somebody could, if needed to, could drive there, Uber there if they needed to take the train. It's also 0.7 miles to the Target Whole Foods shopping center. Again, not around the corner, but that's about a 15-minute walk. For somebody who likes to walk or has a desire to walk, that's not really an unreasonable distance to walk to that shopping center. So again, that was the purpose of again, not the purpose, the goals of the master plan was to have a reduction of parking in areas where these services were available. So with that, I believe that we do meet the site suitability standard. I believe we do reconcile with the master plan. When we look at the positive criteria, we have to look at whether or not there are special reasons which allow for the departure of the zoning regulations. And so we look at the purpose of zoning, specifically paragraph G, which talks about sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, recreational, commercial, and industrial uses, and open space space, both public and private, according to the respective environmental requirements in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey citizens. Again, we look back at the master plan, it does talk about providing alternate housing types as opposed to 1 and 2 family homes. So I believe that this particular purpose of zoning, again, is aligned with your master plan. Paragraph H states the location and design of transportation routes which will promote the free flow of traffic while discouraging location of such facilities and routes which result in congestion or blight. Again, the encouragement of less cars, more walking, more public transportation, again, aligns with that purpose of zoning. And then lastly, paragraph M, which is to encourage coordination of the various public and private procedures and activity shaping land development with a view of lessening the cost of such development and to the more efficient use of land. So we talk about the efficient use of land. Again, you look at sites that are suitable for the goals and objectives of the master plan. There aren't a lot of sites around, just in general, around the state that are within reasonable distances of mass transit, downtowns. So when these sites are available, I believe that is an efficient use of that land. And then lastly, we just look at the negative criteria, and I believe that the variances can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. So just in conclusion, I believe that the special reasons exist for the granting of the variance, that the benefits of granting the requested variances outweigh any detriments and will not have any substantial impact on the surrounding area or substantially impact the intent or purpose of the zone plan and ordinance. With that, I have no additional direct testimony.
I just had a couple questions as far as, I know you mentioned the variances, the bulk variances that we're seeking. There are also certain design waivers. If you can just discuss those waivers. And then it's twofold. You mentioned efficient use of land and the fact that this is an RB2 zone and a two-family would be permitted. Have you evaluated whether or not you can construct a two-family dwelling on this lot in the Vauxhall section?
Yeah, that's a good question. It would be a non-conforming lot, and it would result in a I think an exceptionally narrow home. So I think it would be not a desirable configuration for a two-family or even a single family. Yeah. So with the design waivers, again, they're pointed out in Collier's letter. Again, the first being, again, we mentioned the 18-foot parking spot with the bollard to prevent the 2-foot overhang. That actually eliminates that design waiver. The bollard then prohibits the car or restricts the car from overhanging onto the sidewalk. So we actually would no longer need that design waiver. It does call for a minimum setback of 10 feet from a principal building and a residential zone line. The applicant is proposing a 4-foot parking setback from the variance on a 9-foot parking setback from Montclair Avenue, and a 0 setback from the from the property line along the residential property. So again, these design waivers really are of no detriment. It's not, again, unusual to have parking spaces along a building. The 4-foot sidewalk is sufficient for pedestrian access. It's sufficient for handicap access. So I don't see any negative impact from that. And that kind of also lends itself to the next, to one of the other variances. It also talks about screening required between a parking lot and a property line. So what the applicant is looking to do is to propose a solid vinyl fence in place of the screening. There is case law that says that, or it was resulted from a case law that says that a screening that I would say addresses the ordinance or provides a suitable alternative to what the ordinance is requiring can be considered by a board in granting a buffer or a screening variance. And then again, lastly, there's a requirement that parking is not permitted along a front yard, and that is proposed along Montclair Avenue. So again, I don't see any detriment or any negative impact from those waivers. And again, design waivers don't rise to the same level of proof as a variance, so they're separate from the planning testimony that was given for the variances.
And in respect to any exception, a de minimis exception from the IRS, if you can also address that?
Again, yeah, we actually have eliminated, though, that with the bollard, so we could actually eliminate that waiver.
Okay. All right. I have nothing further at this time.
You're saying you eliminated the bollards. The overhang is where, though? It's onto the sidewalk area or into the drive aisle?
No, so what the RSIS says that a car cannot overhang onto a sidewalk unless you provide an additional 2 feet. But it doesn't say that you need to provide the 2 feet. It just says that a car cannot overhang onto the sidewalk. So we're going to install bollards to prevent the car from overhanging. So that, I believe, meets the intent of the RSIS.
At an 18-foot length or the 20-foot length?
18-foot length.
Isn't the town recommended length 20 feet?
Well, 20 foot if you didn't have bollard. So if you weren't providing a physical barrier to prevent a car from overhanging, then your parking length of your spaces would have to be 20 feet. We're going to provide a barrier which physically prevents the car from overhanging, so the 18 feet would be suitable.
Is that impacting the impervious coverage variance that you're seeking?
No.
Or the building coverage?
No, not at all. It's just the installation of a bollard in front of the parking spot, so it doesn't change the impervious coverage.
The Collier's report also references section 170-2602, which is the off-street parking requirement of being on the same lot. I mean, is that something you factored into? The recommendation from Collier's is that what you're proposing for this parking on the lot in Maplewood that we spent so much time on tonight is unacceptable. I mean, do you have a comment to that? I mean, that's the recommendation that we hear from Collier's.
Right. I think what they're implying is that the off-site parking doesn't eliminate the variance, and we're not representing that it's eliminating the variance. So we still need the variance, or including that in our proofs. It's just the additional parking spaces are being provided to address the variance.
Well, I disagree. I don't think it's just limited to the number of spaces. They say access to the parking lot requires crossing Montclair Avenue, Springfield Avenue, and Milburn Avenue from the building. I mean, we spent quite a bit of time on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, I believe we provided the testimony that we can provide those 5 spaces,
Okay.
and safe access can be provided.
And the final point from the Collier's report, and I know this is very legal, so I'm trying to streamline this a little bit. The recommendation that this board gets from its engineer at Collier's is to adopt the RSIS, not the ITE. I mean, they tell us that in a couple spots in the letter. You're familiar with the recommendation that they're making
Sure.
to this board.
We understand that we're governed by the RSIS. We're not saying that the RSIS, we're not replacing RS with ITE. We're only saying that the ITE, I believe, is a more updated standard and should be considered in deliberating the variance. So we're not saying that the ITE eliminates the variance. It's just that more justification for the variance.
But don't you think there's another aspect beyond the philosophical? ITE is we used to have a board member named George Petco who used to say, that's great if you're in Nebraska. Have you ever been on Route 22? Here, have you ever been on Springfield Avenue? We've heard a lot of public input about what is impacting this area. I would submit, I don't know, you could agree or disagree, I'd like to hear your reaction, that it even makes more sense to have the RSIS apply due to the volume that we experience on Springfield Avenue.
Again, we're not saying that the RSIS doesn't apply. We know that we have to provide 16 parking spaces. That's what's required. We believe that we've submitted the proofs that would justify
Well, 17,
relief.
but you get a credit for the...
Yeah, you get the credit,
Even.
right. But again, That's the state requirement. So the RSS is a state requirement, but the EV law allows us to take the credit. So
But there are-
17 is
but there are
RSIS,
practical
but
aspects to and I realize that this board cannot, and I would advise them that they can't hold against you the requirement of a handicap spot and an EV spot. They're required by state law.
right.
But as a practical matter, because you need a parking variance, we heard some of the difficulties that are potentially at play here, both to the unavailability of enough spots and not using that option that Collier says is unacceptable to park across 3 streets, but jump onto the first available spot on Montclair Avenue to have an impact to these neighbors. I mean, that's really the heart of the deliberation as I see it. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I understand that. That's a consideration.
I mean, you testify you can't put a 2-family house on this lot. You might be right for that small piece of the property that's in Union, but we're analyzing parking. And we're analyzing a D1 parking variance. So, I mean, that's my reaction to the legal presentation, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I don't know if board members have any other questions of me.
No, I agree. I think in the D1 variance, there is case law, you probably know, that says that, all variances are subsumed into the D1 because technically, when you have a non-permitted use, there really are no bulk standards, right? So the board has to consider globally the whole thing as a whole.
Yeah, no, I
whether or
don't
not-
disagree
yeah.
with you there,
Yeah.
but, I think here the specifics are rather dramatic because it is the parking that we're talking about. It's the lack of required parking and the impact that it has into this neighborhood.
Sure. Yeah, and again, we don't want to keep beating the parking to death, but again, the goal is to, market this to, and try to attract tenants that don't want to have multiple cars, that want to have one car, want to be able to walk, want to use mass transit. And again, I understand we can't guarantee that, right? We can't absolutely say that that's what you're going to get, but that's what the applicant wants to market to. You can't refuse, as you know, he can't discriminate against anybody. He can't say, well, I'm not going to allow you to park here because you have 3 cars. But again, what I mentioned before, if somebody has 3 cars, it's probably not the place for them to live. If I wouldn't live here because I have 2 cars. I have to have 2 cars just because me and my wife both commute, right? If I had 1 car or I lived within walking distance, or I could commute, take mass transit, I might consider living here, but it's not for everybody.
Right,
I said that
and I
before.
made the point when you offered the engineering testimony, you're citing the master plan as it relates to Union, but the reality here, the master plan is a template to pass zoning ordinances, is it not? I mean, it doesn't govern. It's just it's required, but the master plan allows the Township of Union to pass zoning ordinances. That's ultimately what governs the board, right? It's not the master plan.
Well, the master plan is a goal. I mean, it also puts out a vision and a goal for the town. I mean,
Right, that
I
gets to
get
my
it.
point, though. Here, some of the reasoning that you're using for attracting multifamily users for mass transit and other benefactors we see in Union's Township Center, or areas where you hope to attract those kind of residents. Here, this area is a 2-family zone. It doesn't apply with the same significance, I submit, that you're trying to attach to it. It may be for the Township of Maplewood, but certainly not for the Township of Union.
Well, I'm going to disagree. I think that there are the elements here that the master plan is referring to. There's mass transit. It's a walkable site. The master plan didn't say we're only going to limit these uses to Union Center. I mean, Union Center obviously is a different type of dynamics, right? I agree, it's a different type of a downtown, but in this location, you certainly have the access to the services. You have the access to the mass transit, the same way that Union Center does. If the master plan said, we want these uses in Union Center, I would agree. Then I maybe not want to apply it here, but it doesn't say that. I mean, it just says.
Well, it doesn't say that, but the zoning ordinances say that this is 2-family, not
right.
multifamily.
No, it does.
That's the point I'm making. So I think the significance to your reasoning and your justification would apply with greater weight if this was a multifamily zone and we were dealing with a site plan
Well,
application. We're
if it's a
not.
multifamily zone, we would be before the planning board, we wouldn't be before this board. I
Right,
mean, we're
right.
before this board
Exactly.
because we're not consistent with the plan. I mean, that's the-
Exactly.
But the proof, but in planning, the proofs, part of the proof is to look at the master plan and see how you align or don't align with the master plan. We're not saying that.
I appreciate your
Yeah.
opinion. That's definitely what you're here to do. I'm not,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not quibbling with that for sure, but you made the point I think I was trying to make. If some of the support that you were attaching to your reasoning, you would be before the planning board for a site plan application, I mean, in my opinion. And that's.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the purpose of this board, is to hear all the evidence. It's a quasi-judicial board. I mean, they're here to hear the evidence, weigh it out, and decide if the variance is granted or not. If we conformed to everything to the T, we wouldn't be here. We'd be before the
Right.
planning board, and if we were an as-of-right application, the planning board would have no choice but to approve it. But we don't
They'd
have,
have
we
limited
we wish we
jurisdiction.
had that case, right?
Right.
We wouldn't be here. If we had an as-of-right application, it would be great. We would have been done in 20 minutes, right?
Right.
But
Well,
we're not.
conceivably, if you had less units, you would need less parking spaces, and perhaps it would be more compliant, right?
It's true, but it's still.
If it would
it's-
have less impervious coverage, it would be conforming.
Right,
You know,
it's-
if it
but
had
would-
enough
wouldn't
parking, you
eliminate-
wouldn't need the parking across the street, you wouldn't need waivers. I mean, these are what the board is considering.
It's a point, but it still need a D1. It doesn't eliminate the D1 variance, though. So we're still here, and we still have to provide the same proofs. Either
So
way,
noted.
But we'll note it.
Unless the board has any questions, I reserve the right to.
Yeah, I guess it's public comment. You have any other witnesses?
Not yet, no. See, Maplewood is a permitted use in Maplewood, so it's a whole different application in Maplewood.
So I can address it. We've actually had conversations with the Maplewood Planning Board, and so we knew we had a D1 variance, so we knew we had to come here first. But we've had talks with the planning staff and presented also before their design committee, as far as Springfield Avenue's design committee, we've presented the plans. And again, it is a permitted use, the building in that zone.
Do you know, counsel, if the allowance of parking from another property onto the one we're proposing across the street here prompts a variance for that property owner? Or a waiver, similar to, it would in Union, I know that. I don't know Maplewood's laws.
Well,
If you can pull, we do have our zoning chart on, we do have the Maplewood zoning.
Well, I'm
chart.
just curious
I
if
don't-
you know, because that's just another unknown, and you've conditioned anything the board does if it acts favorably to satisfying those details. I just was wondering.
I don't recall off the top of my head of the Maplewood standard.
I mean, Maplewood will also follow RSIS standards, so it would be the same parking requirements. When we go to Maplewood, it's going to be the same parking requirements. It's going to be RSIS with the EV credit. It's
Well,
going
I'm
to
not talking about the development of the building on this subject property. I'm talking about the allowance of parking for the property across the street, taking on vehicles which aren't patrons to that location. That could prompt a waiver or a variance at that site.
I got
I
you.
don't know whether that owner realizes that or not.
We don't know.
It
but
would in
if-
Union. I don't know if it would in Maplewood.
I don't know the answer, but again, if we go to Maplewood and they don't allow it, then we don't have an application. We don't have a project.
Other board members that would like to question the testimony of Mr. Gallerano? Hearing none.
I think it's,
Inform the public and council for the applicant that we do have a time limit at our meetings, and it's set at 10:30. So at this time, I'm going to request a motion and a second to adjourn, and we'll determine a date. Without, we're going to adjourn and not do a further notice. So do we have a date? Well, I'll poll the board. Do you want to stay? Mr. Benavenga, you'll stay? Mr. Johnson? Ms. Martins, yes?
Ms. Moore, you have no further witnesses,
I have
right?
no further witness, but
Okay.
I did want an
Okay.
opportunity just to briefly discuss something with my client. If I
Okay,
could
we
just
also need public comment, as you know,
Yes,
so.
I understand that.
That's the one variable here, then, and
Yes.
it is. You want, yeah, let's take a 2-minute
2 minutes?
recess, yeah.
I took the poll, the board will stay.
Okay, great. No, I just needed 2 minutes to speak with my client
Okay,
if the
well,
board
then
would
we'll take a
afford an
2-minute
opportunity.
intermission,
Yes,
okay?
thank you so much.
Okay, at this time, we'll continue. Are there any other board members that would like to question the testimony of Mr. Gallerano on his planning testimony? Hearing none. Are there any members of the public that would like to question the testimony that Mr. Gallerano has given? Hearing none. Okay. Oh.
I did have one question, well, a couple of questions, but the building itself, is it going to be electric or gas or solar? Does anybody know how?
I don't know that the planner offered any
Well,
testimony about that.
He did not offer testimony on that. If you want to make a comment, that'll be the next session.
Okay.
Okay?
Question I said, you said to,
Sorry, I'm not interrupting. I just want to know clarity. Is this question or is this public
No,
comment?
No, this is I asked for the
Okay, I
question.
misunderstood. He
Do you have
corrected
any
me.
questions of the testimony that Mr. Gallerano
He corrected me.
has
Thank you.
given?
we stated that this property, basically, the zone, I know all the words y'all use, is for a two-family building, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But you also stated that basically not desirable or big enough for that development, correct?
Yeah, it would be an undersized lot.
Undersized.
Right.
So you're actually trying to make it bigger because of Maplewood property to now take a little bit of Vauxhall and make it the master plan, as you say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, the master plan, as the gentleman, Mr. Robert, said, my name's Robert too, mentioned, is one thing that is correct, the master plan. I've been here for 20-plus years. Down on Springfield Avenue was a Maplewood plumbing supply. They tore it down and put a Wawa. Across the street is Avon, is a building by New Jersey Transit, apartments. Master plan, you're saying, like you said, for Maplewood, you come down Springfield Avenue, the jewelry store, they tore down, they put units. By the library, they put units. There used to be basically a deli there, tore down, put units. They're putting units, there used to be the Ford dealership down there. The master plan for Maplewood, that Springfield Avenue, is good for people for taking the bus. But when it was, again, this is Vauxhall. Union Center, same thing. They're developing up that whole master plan and Union Center. Lovely. I take my wife down and go out to dinner. It's great. We can walk around and everything like that. You're talking about restaurants in Vauxhall. There's no restaurants in Vauxhall. There's a Nunzio's. There's a Joe Pizza. There's a chicken place. Okay? I'm not trying to be funny or disrespectful to anybody here, race or color. But the area you're talking about is dominantly black. Okay? It's dominantly black. Not too many people, some people ride their bike or whatever have you. You can't ride your bike on Springfield Avenue. You can't. It's not doable. There's no parking lanes there. And Union Center is parking lanes. You say use the sidewalk. If any of my neighbors here will be walking on the sidewalk, they have to get out the way for a person to ride a bike.
Yeah, so the bike doesn't, people generally know where they can ride their bikes and not ride them. So you don't necessarily have to ride your bike on Springfield Avenue. It's again, it's walkable. So they might ride their bike in other places. People usually know where it's safe to ride a bike and not ride a bike. I wouldn't attempt to ride it either, but I would certainly walk along Springfield Avenue. I've walked it, and I know I've walked this area. You know, we've been working on this project for, I don't know, I think over a year now. I've walked it. I don't see anything that stops anybody from walking along Springfield Avenue. I mean, there's sidewalks. There's nothing that stops you. If you want to walk down the street, I don't see anything that stops somebody from doing
We're
that.
not saying we can't walk down the street. I'm not saying that. But in the plans for the building, you're saying there are parking spots for bicycles. Didn't you say that?
Yeah, I did, but they don't have to ride their bikes down Springfield
So they don't have to
Avenue,
put a
do
bike stop there neither. But it's in the
But
plans.
But people may have bikes and want to have bikes, not that they have to ride
Correct.
them,
They
not
might
that they have to
want
ride them on
bikes.
Springfield Avenue.
Okay.
Some people just like to ride their bikes. So, I mean,
They want to ride their bikes, might have to put on the back of their car to go to Maplewood or other areas, the reservation to ride their bike. So you're not riding in it. So what you're saying and trying to bring to us is things that we're not going to ever use. The master plan that you're making for us of Maplewood from the Dunkin' Donuts used to be down. They're building down that area, coming up. So Vauxhall is great that this is our lovely town. We love Vauxhall area. It's not Union, it's Vauxhall. You know anything about Vauxhall? Maybe you don't, but I'm not going to go there. The thing about you said in the lease for across the street, they can't break the lease, right? It's in the lease, it's written there, right? Okay. So going back to the same lease, the gentlemen are proposing for nobody can park in the spots there. You're breaking the lease. You said you can't break a lease. That's breaking the lease.
wait, say it again, breaking.
You're saying that the people across the street, they can't break, if it's in the lease, they can't break the lease. You don't know the person who owns the place if he's going to be here in 5 minutes from now. God forbid he drops dead. So basically, if this thing goes past, supposedly, and it's not signed, and if something happens to the owner, who's next to say that basically, well, I don't want this. That was the previous owner.
But the sale of property doesn't negate the lease. That runs with the sale. So selling a property doesn't abolish the lease. So if there's a lease on a property and somebody buys the property, they have to honor the lease. Sale of the property doesn't negate the lease, unless that's in the agreement, but I don't believe it is. So the lease runs with the property, unless otherwise agreed to between the two parties. So I understand what you're saying. He could sell that building 5 years from now, but the new owner has to honor the lease. I mean, that's
He actually has to do that?
Absolutely.
That's-
Leases run with the property. You can't kick
so
someone.
whoever says no lease-
Look, there's a number of legal variables there. We made the point in
Thank
this
you,
record
thank you,
already.
Mr.
Just,
Rob, I
let's keep it's a still direct question time, so, I mean, we're going a
I
little far
apologize.
afield.
I knew you guys are tired. I'm tired, too. Other thing is, and I guess this part kind of coming towards the end about the area, because this goes back to the first meeting, somebody made a comment about that this is going to be the cornerstone of the area. Were you here last time with that meeting?
No, I didn't. So obviously.
I will
didn't say
address that about you said the cornerstone of the area. But getting back once again to the parking area, so we got 12 parking spots, and one is for EV, but you said there are going to be 2 spots now.
2 spots for EV. That's what's required.
But I thought one was for credit.
So what happens is.
17 spaces are required. They're proposing 12. They're proposing an EV vehicle, so they get 1 credit.
Okay, so that means they put another EV on the
There's
premises?
1 EV space on the site.
But he just said
No, there's 2. We can only get credit
Well, they
for
get
one.
credit.
We can only get credit for
So
one.
Well, you get credit for 2
There's a
spaces.
limit on the credits. You don't get like an unlimited
there's
credits.
one.
It's a
So
credit
you-
for one.
So it can be revised, you can't put 2 on the paperwork you put. You can't have 2 then.
Listen, owner can put as many EVs on a site as he wants. He only gets a certain amount of credits. So he can make them all EVs if
Right,
he wants.
they could put 12 EVs.
Yeah, you can put 12. There's no limitation. You only get, the limitation is on the amount of credit that you
Okay,
get.
and the part you're talking about blocking, is that, you're talking about like you go to a driveway or a parking lot, that cement piece that they put there?
Well, we're proposing those along the fence. Along the sidewalk, we're talking about like a bollard, which is a steel pipe.
Like you have in front of the gas stations?
Yeah, but these would be decorative. There are types that are decorative. The ones in the gas stations are commercial looking. These would be residential looking.
Well, there's nothing residential looking with a cement collar along Springfield Avenue, unless you're gonna put chain, somebody can get in.
We're not putting chains. That's not what
Okay,
we're
well, it's
looking
not
to do.
very decorative to put those type of,
Well, there's decorative types. The ones you see in the gas stations are commercial looking. These are decorative. They have a sleeve that goes over the steel pipe, and it has a different kind of look. So
yeah, I know, I deal with them at my plumbing store.
yeah. So
I'm kinda
we're
familiar
not
with
looking
what
to
they
put
are.
the
They're not
yellow.
sleeves,
We're not looking for the yellow
PVC.
steel pipes that you
Not
see in
sleeves,
gas
PVC.
stations. Yeah.
I don't want to go back and forth on debate, right, but it's basically like, the thing about it is that you want to put a 9 instead of a 2, and the same thing, not being sarcastic, it's like painting lipstick on a pig is still a pig. The area is for 2 buildings, not for 9. In your master plan, it will work in other areas of Maplewood further down Springfield Avenue. But in Vauxhall area, which is basically from the corner next door, which is Vauxhall area where everybody walks and knows each other as a community, it's not going to work. But you see,
Mr. Williams, I think you're going into
I
opinion.
apologize.
I mean, we're really trying to, he's here for direct questions.
okay, so the direct question then about security. These will be security on the property, we said, right?
Correct.
But there's no security across the street.
So the security across the street would be managed by that building owner. So the tenants are going to have either a tag or a sticker that's going to, so the owner across the street knows what cars are supposed to be there.
Okay.
It's up to them to manage their own parking lot. We're not going to manage their parking lot. If there's cars that are parked here illegally, it's up to him to tow them off. But the tenants will have some identification. It could be a window tag, it could be a sticker, whatever it is. So the owner of that building knows what cars should be there. That's him to police his own or monitor his own parking lot. I
And
mean,
who's paying for those parking spots across the street?
the owner's paying for those.
The owner's paying for the 10 over there.
Yep.
And you could get more if money is correct to pay for it, correct?
I think he has 5 with the option for another 5.
So it's 10.
10, yeah,
So it's 10 plus the 12 we have here, that's
Right.
22.
22.
So 22 spots
That's correct,
that are designated to that building,
correct,
where they tag on their car saying that only those cars can park there.
correct.
And
And
any
that-
other car come, if it's in the lease, they can't switch cars out.
Well,
Is it-
an owner on site, a particular tenant's going to have a spot assigned to his unit. Now, if he has a visitor coming and he wants the visitor to use that spot, he can move his car across the street and let his visitor park on the site. I do it at my house, right? I live in a townhouse. When I have a visitor, I move my car down the street. I let the visitor use my driveway. It's just a courtesy, so they don't have to walk.
I heard that earlier.
Yeah. So I mean, so that's the ability. So, if he says, listen, park in my spot, if it's somebody who can't walk or has trouble walking, or somebody says, I'm coming to your house, I don't want to walk, right? So it's okay, park in my spot, I'll park across the street. I mean, it's a simple solution. I mean, I don't think it's that
Simple solution,
complicated.
because like you said, you got a townhouse. This is not a townhouse area.
The point is that arrangements can be made that the spots can be
Yes,
switched
arrangements
if
can be
needed.
made.
It's-
Also,
Whether it's an
arrangements-
apartment or a townhouse, my point is that the arrangements could be made, spots could be switched. He can move their car, have somebody park there,
Okay.
regardless.
So my point, my arrangements is to relocate the building.
Yeah, well, that's an opinion.
Same thing. Same thing.
Janet Patterson, 168 Waldorf Place, Vauxhall. The parking spots, are they facing Montclair Avenue, or are they facing underneath the building?
They're facing the building. So as you come in, they go on either side. Some face the building, some face away the building. So it's like in a shopping center. You have a center aisle and then spots that are 90 degrees.
Okay, I was trying to figure out, okay, you have 12 spots in the lot,
Correct.
correct? You have one for plug-in whatever cars. You have one for handicap, correct?
Correct.
So that's 10 spots, basically.
Well,
Right.
no,
No,
all
they
the spots are
you can't, they
counted.
get credit for those.
You get credit
can't-
for all
I
those
made that
spots.
point. You cannot hold it against them that the state mandates handicap and electric vehicle spaces.
Okay, all right, I was just trying to figure out the numbers.
They still need a parking variance, and you're not wrong. It's just that you can't hold it against them.
Okay, all right.
Okay, You're welcome.
Any other questions from the public on the testimony that Mr. Gallerano has given? Hearing none, are there any members of the public that would like, we heard a lot of comments already. Are there any members of the public that would like to come forward and comment on this application? Mr.
Chair.
Patterson?
Yes, now's the
Yes.
time to do that.
Chair, if I may, before, I'm sorry, I didn't get this gentleman's name, I apologize. We've spoken to our clients, we've heard some comments. The applicant is asking for an adjournment in order to revisit, to modify the application at this time, based on some of the feedback from the board and some of the comments.
I think the only procedural reaction I'd have to that, Mr. Chairman, I mean, we're basically done. I think a dismissal without prejudice or something along that line. I mean, I can't see adjourning it to a date certain with all the testimony we've heard on 2 different nights in the context of some of these, half of this board actually then sitting and watching the tape and certifying to that. So there's been a lot, and the public's input from 2 meetings. I mean, it wouldn't prejudice you to withdraw without prejudice. I mean, that, to me, and it would have to be a resubmission.
Would the board be willing to present to the applicant to propose a reduction in the number?
That's a new application, in essence, yeah. And if you're doing it prior to a ruling, then you're avoiding the res judicata aspect, and if whether we're hearing, you know.
Yes, exactly, I would not, prior to the ruling. So you would require us to modify the application, the board would entertain a request to, subject to condition of approval, providing revised plans to address that. It's just a number of units.
No, that's, you're asking them to consider this in a speculative vacuum and something that's not part of the record. I can't see that as possible. I mean, they can rule, and you could, if it's favorable, it's conditioned. We noted the conditions in terms of Maplewood, in terms of the lease and some of the details. That record is clear on that. You can't condition it on, if you deny it, I'll come back with less units and maybe that'll work.
No, that's not my intent. The proposal is that we wanted to modify, to do some modification, adjourn it, it's late, to modify the plans to reduce, possible reduction of a couple of the units prior to the votes, and that's what we're asking the board to adjourn it to.
That changes the application dramatically, because then you're going to have to do new analysis from Colliers, you're going to have to do new counts. It does. I made the point in reaction to the testimony from the planner on the D1. You have, and he said that the bulk variances are subsumed. And I
Yes,
made the point
in the
that less
D1.
units perhaps would alleviate the bulk variance for the parking. You still have a D1. You're here for a D1 variance. But I was just reacting to the testimony as I do for the board. I don't vote, as you know. I try to guide the board, and when a good planner like Mr. Gallerano offers a lot of legal details, I make sure the board has the benefit of my knowledge as their attorney. So I think that's a stretch. I mean, I don't see anything at this juncture, because we already stayed past time. We're trying to accommodate the public. We're trying to accommodate the board members.
Just to put it on the record, again, if an applicant is asked for an adjournment to modify based on comments from the board as a public prior to any discussion fully from the board, and with the intent that we know we would have to notice on that modified application to come back to present that before the board.
You would have to notice.
And I completely agree, and that we would stipulate, obviously, that any amendment to the application would require new notices, not only.
Here's the problem, though. If that's 2 months removed, like the November meeting that we're, 2 months, I mean, my math is bad. We're 7 months removed. So I think it's too chopped up in the sense that now with this board, we could have another new board member or change of faces if it's 7 months removed and we're in February of 2024.
So,
you know, I mean, it's.
I'm just trying to make sure that
No,
for clarity purposes.
Believe me, I'm not being argumentative if I sound that way. It's just because I'm tired. but-
So, as far as just clarity purposes, that I don't think the intent is to take 7 months to make these modifications of what we're proposing.
But I'm only raising it because we're 6 to this point, and some of it was practical. Maybe the board didn't have a full complement of members. You know, that can happen again, you know, I mean, that's.
I think also we were waiting for a hearing date, so the applicant waited 4 months for a hearing date from the last time that we were not provided the date.
But still, the duration of time is what concerns me as a matter of fairness to the public and this board, both. So, I mean, the testimony is complete. We're waiting for public comment and a vote. And I don't think the applicant's entitled to an adjournment at that point. I mean, we had accommodated an adjournment in the November hearing, due to a lot of the same testimony and commentary, quite frankly. I mean, it really hasn't changed all that much, even though it took a lot more time to get in. I tried to streamline it a little, but I try not to usurp the role of the board or the public at these meetings. That's my feeling as the board attorney. I don't see,
Well, I believe the testimony tonight, again, we tried to limit to the revisions, the applicant, as well as the planning testimony and the traffic testimony that was not presented. I don't think we had anyone there to discuss the justification, the positive and negative criteria, and there are a lot of questions, albeit repetitive, I would agree with that. But I believe we had to put our proofs in, but just some of the comments that we feel maybe to modify that application. So I'm just respectfully requesting that. I understand it's late in the day, but I believe that based on some of the comments that we could probably make something to reduce the, as you indicated, the parking variance that we're seeking. So we still understand that we need a D1
but you've already
variance.
closed your testimony and you have no further witnesses tonight. So you're looking to basically make a new application, is my feeling.
My understanding of MLU, it doesn't preclude me from asking for that adjournment. I've not seen any case law that says that I can't ask for that case law.
Well, you're going to ask for an adjournment and submit new plans and revise the application without a new date, so the public's not going to know when this new date is. Then whenever that date is, we then have to comprise this record from November of 2022 and May of 2023, probably about 4 or 5 hours at this point now. Another couple months or 6 weeks or 2 weeks or 4 weeks removed, I mean, that's unreasonable, I think. I mean, I don't know what other way to put it. It would have to be a withdrawal without prejudice and start anew as a new application with the particulars about this revised building or changes that you're proposing. I think it's unfair and it's borderline unreasonable, if not definitely unreasonable, to expect this board to maintain. I'm trying to maintain the notes. I got to do a resolution someday. I got a pad here full of notes.
I have to discuss that with my client, just put it on the record that the request for the adjournment was made. I don't, as on the record, see anything that precludes the applicant. Again, I understand the time constraints as far as recreating the record, and I'm certainly cognizant of that. But as far as completely withdrawing the application, there has not been a vote yet, and I'm not asking for the board then to say, hey, your discussion. So I just wanted to make that clear. But just give me an opportunity to speak with the client.
Unless the board disagree. I mean, you don't have to take my feeling is as I've expressed it. If any board member has a different opinion to what we're experiencing, please let me know and make it public.
I don't want to adjourn it. And they withdraw it. We got to do the route. I agree with what Bob said.
I'm sorry. Chair, the applicant will proceed with the application. Thank you.
Proceeding with the meeting, are there any members of the public that would like to make
Patterson.
a general comment? Mr. Patterson, I know you had your hand up.
What was their statement? Remember how to ask?
If you can name and address again, Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, my name is Floyd Patterson. I live at 168 Waldorf Place.
Do you
in
swear
Box
or
Hill.
affirm that any testimony you provide is the truth and the whole truth?
Sure.
Because you're making general comments now, no more questions. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
thank you. No, I think we have a lot of insurgents here tonight. I've heard a lot of comments, a lot of back and forth about a lot of things. And all of you people on the board here all live in Union and all enjoy this town we call Union. And what they're asking for these variances is a lot to give up. And I look to you guys to make an honest and a straightforward, direct decision about this application. I think to ask the citizens of Vauxhall and the Township of Union to make this kind of sacrifice, that our police department, our fire department, our garbage collection, all going to have to make a sacrifice to accommodate them for Maplewood to get the results from it. They're the one who's getting the tax write-off for it. The only thing we getting taxed for is parking. So I would think that you would make an honest and I guess a common sense decision about this application. Thank you.
Earlier, everybody talking about their credentials and everything like that. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, it is. Earlier, when making credentials, what they do, going to different colleges for their degrees and be the lawyer and all that stuff. My credentials, real quick, I'm a United States Navy veteran. I fought for my country. And I'm fighting for this project to be denied because of the people in Vauxhall that I learned to love. My mother, my father is from Vauxhall. My grandfather, my great-grandfather are from Vauxhall. Anybody who knows anything about Vauxhall, Vauxhall used to be called Hilton Heights. It was changed later on to Vauxhall. The comment I was made earlier about it saying this to be the cornerstone of the area. The cornerstone of it is Hilton Avenue, which is the church, First Baptist Church, which the prior minister there for 52 years, he passed. That is the cornerstone of Vauxhall. If you come down Milburn Avenue, everybody who drives down there, you'll see a big, tall steeple. That steeple lets everybody in the area of Vauxhall and area, different places, to see the church there. And that's what Vauxhall is about. The First Baptist Church on Hilton Avenue, which my great-grandfather was one of the founders of that church. So I have a lot of roots in Vauxhall. The thing I just want to say is that basically, you guys might know Jim Duvall. Do you happen to know basically John Lenurigan and Travis Podruski? Those three people I just mentioned, Mr. Duvall was a chief of the fire department in Maplewood who passed away in 2022. Before he passed away, my pastor, Reverend Doc Marion Franklin, for 52 years, passed away a couple months beforehand. My suggestion for that small part of Vauxhall, I see it outside here, I see it in Maplewood, in Springfield, Union area, I see it in Springfield. What I do not see, and I don't know if anybody has a family member that was in the service or lost them in the 9/11, make that property memorial for the heroes that are from Vauxhall, from Union, from Maplewood. A 9 unit does not tell you anything about this area, which people will walk up and down the street, see a memorial area of these people that I just named, just 4 people. There's probably many more. When you walk out here, you see the 9/11 you have there. You go down Maplewood in front of the lobby, you got a piece of the building. What do we have in Vauxhall? What do we have in Vauxhall? You have a name after our pastor. You don't have much in Vauxhall. Vauxhall is a community that where we do walk around. We don't use many buses. We do say hi to our neighbor and sit on the front porch and say hi. Most houses there are owned by some of the people who've been living there all their lives. We own the house. It's not renting or whatever. We own those houses. We pay for it. The taxes. Like I said, the taxes that are going to make off of this is Maplewood. They're getting all the benefits. And what are we getting? A piece of house, a building to look at every day, to worry about the traffic. Once again, I'm a United States Navy veteran. I served 6 years. It'd be nice to see something in Vauxhall for those. My father was in Korean War. You know, God forbid, he's still here, but he's from Vauxhall. If he ever passed away, I would have put him on a stone. The only stone you have is right there, the library they changed over. That's all molded in green. And they changed it from the front to the corner. No one knows what it is. It's not even clean. But I see other towns, off of Chestnut Street, the building they got there, the memorial there. Springfield, nice memorial. I'm just saying to the board, if you do anything, honestly, for Vauxhall area, not Maplewood, but for Vauxhall, because Vauxhall's not Union, it's a part of Vauxhall, make it a memorial for those who we lost, those who we love. During COVID, during 9/11, make it something that our children's children and your children's children can look at and say, oh, Grandma, you from Vauxhall? Yeah. Your grandfather was in the Korean War. Your grandfather was in whatever. It'd be more of a place that people will come down Vauxhall and they will go to the Dunkin' Donuts and other areas to Nunzio's, have something to eat, sit on a bench and look around and see what Vauxhall actually is. Vauxhall is and always will be our home, our community. Now that we don't like they want to build an area and bring it up, but Vauxhall is a small town. All those who are from Union or Vauxhall area, you know what I'm talking about. There's nothing here for your father, your mother, or the same thing from Vauxhall. If you grew up in Vauxhall Union area, to see something every day to be proud of. That little piece of land, let's make it proud of being something that we can actually mean something. Not a building that you sleep and just have cars and garbage and this and that. Make it something beautiful. You want to put greenery there? Put greenery there. Put benches there. Put a wall there. That's my opinion for the board. Thank you.
Are there any more general comments from the public?
I just ask you to swear or affirm that the testimony you provide is the truth and the whole truth.
I do.
Just for the record, your name one more time.
Johnny Russell.
Thank you.
My comments are, I've been here for the night's hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. My comment is referencing that I've been here for the nights to listen to what, to the testimony and to hear from the residents as well as the applicant. And I think the testimony that has been given based on pretty much all the criterion from the traffic, the planner, et cetera. And the comments that I think impact the most would be, number one, we talked about having to cross Springfield Avenue, right, which relates to the parking and the whole thing. That issue we talked about. And you've heard from both sides. I think you reported out something from a Collier report, which indicated a certain information which was basically in contradiction to what the planner had said.
The other thing is, you had the comments from the fire department and so forth, and I heard what the planner said. So you had that aspect for the planning. There's enough information, I think, for this board, hopefully, to make a decision based on the information that you've received, plus the comments that you have received from the public. All right, the impact on our community. Even the last one, which the attorney had spoke to in reference the question about with the 99-year lease, because there's question, at least I heard from the attorney, that question about the lease, you can't be sure about even that. And I understood what the planner said, that, yeah, it's not a problem with a 99-year lease. But the thing about it is, he's saying it can run with the land. But if there's some question by the attorney, then there's a question about whether or not that can be the case. Anything that's going to be a question, while the applicant may be able to deal with it, the problem is our community is going to have to deal with everything that doesn't come out right. It's our community that's going to be impacted the most on this. Whether or not it's the garbage that doesn't work out right, the traffic on Springfield Avenue that doesn't work out right, the people that have to go across the street because we don't have 16 parking spaces, we only have 12, which leaves others. So all of these are questions that I think we're at the point now whereby hopefully you've heard from everybody so that you can make a decision that will not impact on the community. Because whether or not they get the project or don't get the project, the community is still going to be there. We still have to put up with everything that if it doesn't happen, we're fine. If it does happen and something doesn't work out, we're going to be impacted. And we're going to be impacted not just for a short time, we're going to be impacted for a long time. That's my comment. So I hopefully that all of you would take that under consideration when you go through and vote on this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other general comments from the public? Hearing none. Ms. Moore, would you like to sum up?
I'm just going to be brief because I think the board has heard various testimony from our professionals, our architect, our engineer, the planner, as well as our traffic engineer. And they've indicated that this variance in respect to the justification and the proofs that the applicant has to make has provided, as indicated that this is in line with your master plan, notwithstanding that we're asking for a D1 use variance, that we've agreed to make some modifications to the plans with respect to the overhang to eliminate some of the design waivers. And what we believe is an application that would be positive. The traffic engineer indicated that, yes, there may be some traffic, but it wouldn't be an overburden of the streets of the community. We've indicated that we provide ample security as far as the parking is, as far as the overall site is concerned. The respect to the parking, that the parking would be assigned to each unit. And again, we're providing a parking space for each occupant or each unit of the proposed building. There's surplus as far as the additional parking spaces for any additional residents for those 3 parking spaces. In respect to the parking across the street, the testimony is that, yes, we understand that we are seeking that variance, but there's a 99-year lease with the applicant has agreed to make a condition of approval that would run with the land, and the applicant would understand that if they're not able to provide those spaces, that they would have to come back to this board. So again, I believe the applicant had met both the positive and the negative criteria with respect to the D1 use variance, as well as design waivers, and the exceptions as far as the RSIS standards for de minimis exception. And I would ask the board approve the approval as preliminary and final site plan, as well as the requested variances and the waivers that we're asking for.
Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Thank you.
At this time, I believe we can conference this. Ms. Alexander, would you like to begin?
Yes, I'll begin. I feel this application was not defended well. I feel it was just too many loose ends. I feel that the project started out where he said he targeted that this project would work with people who are reducing the cars, not to have multiple cars. There was no clear path as to how this is going to be handled to verify that I can say I only have one car and I may have three. We spoke a lot about the master plan, or I should say they did. The master plan does say that they want a reduction of parking, but I also think that it calls for safetiness. So in terms of where people have to walk around the corner, around the block to park, that I don't think it should be considered as not detrimental. I believe that is detrimental. We didn't do a traffic count. We're seeking the 99-year lease. We don't have it. Possible, those 2 10 spaces we possibly could have are also located where U-Haul trucks are. I'm not sure if that's safe for the 10 people that are going over there. So the safety of the residents, this would really be a negative impact, and maybe, like some have suggested, there could be more use of the land in a better way. Yes, I feel it's detrimental to the community walking from there. I don't see this application as a positive application and will not be voting in favor of it. Thank you.
Ms. Scott.
Good evening, everyone. I concur with a lot Ms. Alexander just said. I just think the parking was all over the place and it wasn't thought out thoroughly. I don't really understand how he did a parking study and did not actually physically come out and do a parking study. The fact that the parking lot is for the overflow of cars is not necessarily in the immediate area, and you have to walk a distance, and then you have to cross Springfield Avenue, and then you have to walk through a gas station, and then you're in a parking lot with potential other vehicles that are unknown to the residents, and we don't know how that's going to be secure. I'm a woman, I wouldn't want to be walking that far alone looking for, my car in a parking lot that hosts 99 possible vehicles. You can have cars in there that just belong to anybody. Somebody could be in the car. Like, that's just a potential for a disaster for me. It's dangerous. I just thought it was just convoluted and not really well thought out. And I just really think that the Vauxhall community coming out and the numbers that you did really and speaking to us and letting us know what kind of impact that this would have on your community that you live in, and that you believe that the benefit of this particular piece of property could be definitely used for something more beneficial to you, that you will be seeing every day, that you have to deal with every day. I think the impact of this whole project is just not going to work. And then, even with the lease, like, it's been a lot of time. And if the lease was that substantial, maybe they should have had it with them, and it should already have been a lease that's been signed, and that they could come in here today and say, we have this lease. It's not a potential lease, but we have a lease that we can actually talk about. I think the garbage part of it just was, something to give us something. Just really didn't speak to much. We didn't know whether or not it was going to be garbage cans, whether it was going to be dumpsters, how that was going to work, whether or not they was going to come in, they wasn't going to come in. And then just the whole parking at the property. And then when you talk about you want to target people that's going to actually live there, all of us understand development from one perspective or another, and developers are in this to make money. So if a potential person comes out and can afford the rent, they're going to rent to that person. It's not necessarily going to be, are you going to ride your bike, you're going to walk, you're going to have a vehicle. If you have the money to rent the apartment, most people are going to make you rent the apartment. So I will be voting no on this application. Thank you.
Mr. Graves.
Good evening, everyone. I haven't heard anything positive from the community versus this concerning this project, because I don't see anything positive concerning this project. We're talking about a lot. I heard the tax dollars primarily going to Maplewood, because it's in Maplewood, the building. I don't see anything positive from the project again. And talk about at least 99 years. If we have a new owner, that new owner, if he wants to get out of that lease, or the current owner wants to get out of that lease, we don't know what's going to happen. So there's no way that I could be supportive of this particular project.
Mr. Wiley.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I agree with my colleagues. I mean, they've said it all. I mean, I can't see where positive outweighs the negative. All I see is a lot of negatives. My concern is the parking mainly. I mean, it's a problem with parking now on Montclair Avenue. Traffic is always congested, trying to go up and down past it. I'm concerned about the safety of the residents of Vauxhall trying to cross Springfield Avenue. I mean, the whole project just seems like a mess to me. I'm not going to go any further because it's all been said, and I'm going to vote no.
Ms. Mortens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Although I'd love to see the site put to use, after hearing the testimony provided today and taking into consideration the public's comments, this proposed use does have a negative impact to the site, to the neighborhood, and to the businesses. Having the parking off-site can definitely cause an overflow into the residential area, and there's just no way to enforce that. I'm also very concerned for the safety of the residents when looking to cross the street and having to do this multiple times a day to get to their cars, so I will definitely be voting no.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also agree with my colleagues. 2 points, the additional parking. Everybody says that it's across the street, but it's actually across 2 streets, and they're main thoroughfares. You've got to cross Springfield Avenue, and you have to cross Milburn Avenue. That's, to me, unacceptable. And also, trying to put 9 families in a 2-family zone, I think, is a stretch, and I agree with the community that this would be very detrimental, and therefore be voting no.
Mr. Benavenga.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So based on the testimony given, I feel there are too many stipulations to operate this facility properly and respectfully. I also believe this structure brings a negative impact to the neighborhood and to the township. With that being said, I'm going to vote no.
As for myself, I feel the variances requested will definitely have a negative impact on the neighboring properties. A residential multifamily is not permitted in a residential 2-family RB zone. There's also a parking shortage and parking overflow issues. In my opinion, the property is not well suited for the proposed use, and I feel the applicant has failed to prove and justify both the negative and positive criteria. Thus, I will vote no on this application. At this time, may I have a motion and a second to deny the variances applicable to this application?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board deny the variance applicable to this application and that council is directed to prepare a resolution consistent with the board's decision.
Second.
Roll call.
Mr. Wiley.
No.
Ms. Alexander.
No.
I mean, yes. Yes.
Ms. Alexander.
Yes.
Ms. Martins.
Yes.
Mr. Benavenga.
Yes.
Ms. Scott.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Johnson.
Yes.
Mr. Champy.
Yes.
June 14th, it'll be on the board's agenda for a resolution.
Mr. Chairman, there being no further business coming before the board this evening, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. So moved.